Story 1. My daughter said she didn't want me to come to the family Christmas, so I decided to stop paying her bills. You know when you have that feeling that something is wrong, but you can't put your finger on what it is? That was exactly what I felt as I climbed the steps of my daughter Rebecca's house that cold December afternoon. At 58, after a divorce that left me starting over from scratch, I had built a simple but satisfying routine. I worked as a nurse at Riverside Regional Hospital, lived in a one-bedroom apartment that fit my budget, and the greatest pleasure in my life was being able to help my only daughter. Rebecca opened the door with that half-forced smile I had learned to recognize in the last 4 years since she married David. "Hi, Mom. Come in. I was waiting for you." The house was impeccable, as always, with those expensive furniture pieces that I knew very well who was paying for. David was in the living room messing with his latest model phone and barely looked up when I entered. "So, about Christmas?" I began, trying to sound excited as I sat on the Italian leather sofa that cost 3 of my salaries. "I was thinking of making my special apple pie, the one you always loved when you were little. Remember how we used to make it together? You would get all dirty with cinnamon and—" Rebecca interrupted me, and something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "About that, I need to tell you something." She looked at David, who finally put down his phone and joined us, standing behind her armchair like a bodyguard. "What is it, dear?" I tried to keep my voice calm, but I already felt I wasn't going to like what was coming. "This year is going to be different. David's parents are coming from Connecticut, and we're going to have a more formal dinner. More sophisticated, you understand." She avoided my gaze, playing with the diamond ring I had helped pay for. "That's fine. I can make something more elaborate, too. Or I can just bring some things and help in the kitchen. You know how I like to." "No, Mom." Her voice came out firmer, colder. "What I'm trying to say is that, well, it would be better if you didn't come this year." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. I blinked a few times, trying to process what I had just heard. "What do you mean, me not go?" "It's Christmas, Rebecca. We always spend Christmas together." David cleared his throat and took a step forward. "Mrs. Thompson, what Rebecca is trying to explain is that my parents have very specific expectations about how festivities should be conducted. They come from a family with very particular traditions." "Traditions that don't include me? You mean—" The words came out more bitter than I intended. "It's not personal," Rebecca lied, but the way she said it made it clear it was exactly personal. "It's just that they're not used to your way of being." "My way of being?" I worked 60 hours a week taking care of sick people, paid my own daughter's bills for 4 years, and my way of being wasn't suitable for the refined family of my son-in-law. I got up slowly, feeling each of my 58 years weighing on my shoulders. "I understand. My way of being as a nurse of humble origins doesn't match David's sophisticated parents." "Mom, you don't need to dramatize." "Dramatize?" I laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "Rebecca, I raised you alone after your father abandoned us. I worked 2 jobs to give you a decent education so you could go to college, so you could meet men like David. And now my way of being isn't suitable for my own daughter's Christmas." David stepped closer, and for the first time since I'd known him, he spoke directly to me without that forced politeness. "Look, Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to be frank with you. My parents expect a certain level. They don't understand why someone who works as a nurse needs to be present at a dinner with executives and successful people. It's uncomfortable for everyone." The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca didn't say a word to defend me. She didn't say I was her mother, that I deserved respect, that without me, she wouldn't be in that luxurious house. She just sat there, shrunk in the armchair like a child who didn't want to get involved in an adult fight. "Executives and successful people." I repeated his words slowly. "I understand. And I, who save lives every day, who keep families together in the most difficult moments, who pays bills, who contributes to this family. I'm not successful enough." "It's not that, Mom," Rebecca finally spoke, but her voice was weak, without conviction. "No? Then what is it, Rebecca? Explain to me what it is, because I really don't understand how the woman who raised you, who supported you, who still—" I stopped before mentioning the money. Something told me not to play that card yet. David crossed his arms. Frankly, Mrs. Thompson, my father-in-law was a respected man in the community, a successful lawyer, with a house in the best neighborhood in the city. Rebecca grew up with certain expectations about how things should be done. My parents will expect to talk to people of the same social level as them. My ex-husband, who abandoned us when Rebecca was 12 years old, that's the standard of success you use? My voice was rising in tone, and I could see the neighbors at the front window approaching to listen better. At least he had class, David said, and it was like he had slapped me. Rebecca said nothing. My daughter, whom I carried in my arms when she cried missing her father, whom I consoled when friends mocked her thrift store clothes, whom I encouraged to study so she could have a better life than mine. This same daughter sat there silently, agreeing that I didn't have enough class to be in the presence of her in-laws. I understood perfectly, I said finally, grabbing my purse. Thank you for clarifying that for me. Really, thank you. Mom, don't leave like this. We can talk after the holidays. Do something just the two of us. Rebecca finally got up, but I was already at the door. Sure, dear. After the successful executives leave, you can call me when you need someone without class to help you with something. I opened the door and felt the cold December air burn my face. Have a wonderful Christmas. You deserve it. I left without looking back, but I could hear David telling Rebecca, it was better this way. She understood. Yes, I had understood. I had understood perfectly. When I got home, my one-bedroom apartment had never seemed so small and at the same time so cozy. It was mine, paid for with my own sweat, without anyone judging me for not having enough class. I made chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table with a pile of bank statements that I always kept organized in a blue folder. For years, 4 years since Rebecca married David, and I started helping with the expenses of the new house. I started doing the math with an old calculator that still worked perfectly, even though it wasn't state-of-the-art like everything in my daughter's house. January 2021, $2,800 for the house down payment. It's just to help Mom. We'll pay the rest. February, $1,500 for the financing because David was between jobs. March, $1,500 again, plus $800 for car emergency. April, May, June, every month at least $1,500, sometimes more. My fingers flew on the calculator while my heart raced. $2,000 here, $3,000 there. The month they wanted to change the living room furniture, $4,500. The delayed honeymoon month, $5,000. It's a loan, Mom. We'll pay it back when David gets the promotion. The promotion that never came. Or rather, that came, but then they needed to invest in appearance for the new position. Clothes, accessories, that 2023 silver sedan that was in their garage. When I finished the calculation, I stared at the number on the calculator for about 5 minutes. $123,450. That was just counting the direct transfers I could trace in the statements. It didn't include the expensive birthday gifts, the dinners I paid for when we went out together, the clothes I bought for her to look presentable for David's events. $123,000. You know how much I had in my savings account? $1,200. You know where I spent my last 3 vacations? Nowhere. You know the last time I bought new clothes for myself? I didn't remember. I picked up the most recent statement and saw it there. Monthly automatic transfer. Rebecca Thompson Miller. $2,100 every month religiously. It came out of my account on the 5th. I didn't even need to think about it anymore. It was like paying electricity or phone, a fixed bill in my life. And today she had told me I didn't have enough class to sit at the Christmas table of the house I was paying for. I got up and went to the refrigerator. There it was, stuck with a butterfly magnet that Rebecca gave me on Mother's Day 3 years ago, the bank card with the numbers for automatic transfers. I picked up my phone and called. Good morning, National Bank. This is Jennifer. How can I help you? Hi, Jennifer. I need to cancel an automatic transfer that's set up on my account. Sure, I can help with that. I'll need to confirm some information first. 10 minutes later, it was done. The automatic transfer of $2,100 that left my account every 5th for my daughter's account had been canceled. For years, for months, And 17 days after I had set it up, thinking I was helping my daughter start her married life. Anything else I can help you with today, Mrs. Thompson? Actually, yes. Are there other automatic transfers set up for that same destination account? Jennifer checked. Yes, I see here a $300 transfer that goes out every 15th, referring to, let me see. It's marked as Rebecca's cart. Cancel that one too, please. Cancelled. Anything else? That's all. Thank you, Jennifer. I hung up the phone and stood there in the kitchen holding the device in my hand. Done. After 4 years, I had cut the financial umbilical cord that connected my bank account to my daughter's luxurious life. You know what I felt? Lightness. For the first time in years, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. $2,400 a month would stay in my account. Money I could spend on myself, save for my retirement, or simply leave there growing without having to worry if it would be enough to pay my adult daughter's bills. I took all the bank statements that were scattered on the table and went to the paper shredder I never used. One by one, I started feeding those papers through the machine. The noise was satisfying, as if I were undoing the last 4 years of exploitation page by page. When I finished, I took a wine glass that was saved for special occasions and poured myself a generous amount. I toasted alone in my small kitchen. Merry Christmas to me. For the first time in 4 years, I was going to have an entire December without worrying if the money would be enough to pay my bills and Rebecca's bills, too. I could buy presents for myself. I could dream of a trip on my next vacation. I could look at the bank statement without feeling that tightness in my chest. My daughter had told me I wasn't welcome at her Christmas because I didn't have enough class. Fine. She was going to find out exactly how much it costs to have class when the money from the classless mother stopped arriving in her account. I finished the wine and went to bed more peaceful than I had been in months. Tomorrow would be the first day of my new life. A life where I didn't exist to pay the bills of those who were ashamed of me. And you know what? I was anxious to see what it would be like. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was enjoying my day off watching an old movie on Netflix. It was Rebecca, and from the tone of her voice, I already knew it wasn't to wish me a good day. Mom, I need you to do something for me today. It wasn't a request. It was an order. For years listening to that tone, and I was only now realizing how she had changed with me after she got married. What is it, Rebecca? Can you go to shopping center today? I need some gifts for David's parents. Good things. You understand? They arrive tomorrow and I won't have time to go out. Boulevard Shopping Center, the most expensive mall in the city, where a simple blouse cost more than my 2-day salary. Why can't you go? Mom, I have meetings at the office all day, and then I need to go to the salon to get my hair done for tomorrow. Can you do this for me? It's important. Important for her, as always. Everything in Rebecca's life was important. My double shifts at the hospital to pay her bills, that wasn't important. My health, my tiredness, my free time, none of that was important. But buying gifts for the in-laws who thought I was inadequate to sit at the same table, that was important. What kind of gift? Something sophisticated for Mrs. Miller. Maybe an Italian leather purse or a French silk scarf. Something like that. Between $300 and $500. For Mr. Miller, a good Scottish whiskey or maybe a brand name tie. You understand, right? Between $300 and $500 each, for gifts for people who considered me an embarrassment. And how am I going to pay for this, Rebecca? Oh, Mom, you can put it on your card and then we'll settle up. Like always. Like always. Like always meant I paid and never saw the color of the money back. Like always meant I was going to use my credit card to buy expensive gifts for people who despised me. Okay, I said, and I felt a strange sense of calm. I'll go to the mall today. Thank you, Mom. You're an angel. Oh, and buy some beautiful flowers, too, for me to give to Mrs. Miller when they arrive. White orchids, if they have them. An angel. I was an angel when she needed something. When it came to including me in Christmas, I was an embarrassment. Leave it to me, dear. 2 hours later, I was at Boulevard Shopping Center. But I didn't go to the expensive stores she had suggested. I went straight to the department store at the end of the corridor. The one that always has promotions and discounts. I spent an hour choosing very carefully. For Mrs. Miller, I bought a brown synthetic leather purse that cost $45. It looked like real leather if you didn't look too closely, and it had an interesting vintage charm. For Mr. Miller, I found a navy blue tie with small polka dots for $19.99. Discreet, conservative, appropriate for an executive. The flowers were easier. Instead of expensive white orchids, I bought an arrangement of yellow chrysanthemums for $22. Beautiful, durable, cheerful flowers. Total bill, $87.99. I wrapped everything carefully using gold wrapping paper and red ribbons I bought at the stationery store for $5. Everything looked very presentable, even pretty, I would say. I took the gifts to Rebecca in the late afternoon, arriving at her house with my best smile. "Mom, good thing you arrived. Let me see." She opened the bags anxiously, and I watched her facial expression gradually change. "Mom, what purse is this?" "A brown leather purse. It turned out beautiful, didn't it? Look at the finish." Rebecca turned the purse over, looking for the label. "Mom, this isn't Italian leather. This is from Central Varieties." "It's leather," I insisted, keeping my smile. "And it goes with everything. Mrs. Miller will love it." She picked up the tie. "And this? Mom, where did you buy this?" "A beautiful tie for Mr. Miller. Blue is a very elegant color. Don't you think?" "Mom, this costs less than $20. I can see the price on the tag." Rebecca was getting red. "And these flowers?" I asked for white orchids. "Chrysanthemums are much more cheerful and they last longer." David appeared in the room at that moment, attracted by his wife's altered voice. "What happened?" "My mother bought cheap gifts for your parents. Look at this." She showed him the purse as if it were evidence of a crime. David examined the gifts with a disgusted face. "Mrs. Thompson, my parents will notice immediately that these are low-quality products. This is embarrassing." "Embarrassing. That word again." "Sorry, guys," I said, pretending sadness. "I thought what mattered was the affection, not the price. But if you didn't like it, I can try to exchange." "There's no way to exchange now, Mom. They arrive tomorrow morning." Rebecca was almost screaming. "Then you'll have to explain to them that the gifts were chosen by me," I said, still smiling. "You can say they were bought by your in-law's grandmother, that classless nurse who won't be at Christmas." The silence was awkward. David and Rebecca looked at each other, clearly realizing that I was no longer being the understanding and submissive mother as always. "Mom, you're acting strange," Rebecca said finally. "Am I? That's a shame. Well, I'll leave you with the gifts. I'm sure you'll explain everything very well to your sophisticated guests." I left their house with a light heart. I had spent less than $100 instead of the $800 to $1,000 they expected. And I had still given Rebecca exactly what she deserved. Cheap gifts for people who raised her to look down on me. The next day, my phone rang around noon. It was Rebecca, and for the first time in years, she was talking to me with a voice I didn't recognize. A desperate voice. "Mom, you have to come here now." "What happened, dear?" "David's parents arrived this morning and they didn't like the gifts. Mrs. Miller said the purse looked like fake leather and Mr. Miller barely opened the tie properly. They're thinking that we don't have good taste. Didn't have good taste. How life took interesting turns." "And what do you want me to do, Rebecca?" "You need to come here and explain that it was you who chose. Say that you don't understand expensive gifts. That you bought what you thought was pretty. Please, Mom. They can't think we're ordinary people." "Ordinary people." I laughed. I couldn't help myself. "Rebecca, dear, you told me I couldn't go to your Christmas because I don't have enough class to be in the presence of David's parents. Remember?" "Mom, that was different. And now you want me to go there to take the blame for the cheap gifts and save your reputation with your in-laws? Please, Mom, just this once." "No." The word came out so simple, so definitive that even I was surprised. "What do you mean?" "No, I won't go. You don't want me there. Remember? I would ruin the sophisticated atmosphere. Solve it with your refined in-laws however you can. I don't exist for you anymore. Forgot." "Mom, you can't do this to me." But I had already hung up. And for the first time in 4 years, I hung up on my daughter, smiling. That night I couldn't sleep. But it wasn't because of anxiety or remorse. It was because of a strange and new sensation: freedom. For the first time in 4 years, I had said no to my daughter, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, I felt better than I had felt in a long time. But something still bothered me. I had cut off the money, had stopped being the submissive mother who did everything they told me to, but there was still a rope connecting me to them, a rope called inheritance. The next morning, I called the law office that had handled my divorce 10 years ago. The secretary managed to fit me into Dr. Smith's schedule for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. "Mrs. Thompson," he said when I entered his office, "it's been a while since we talked. How can I help you?" "Dr. Martinez, I need to make a will." He picked up a notepad and a pen. "Of course, it's always good to have these documents organized. I imagine you want to leave everything to your daughter, Rebecca." "Actually, no." He looked up from the paper, surprised. "No, I want to leave all my assets to charitable institutions. Municipal Children's Hospital, Santa Antonio Nursing Home, and the Cancer League, divided equally among the 3. Dr. Smith stared at me for a moment, clearly trying to process what I had just said. "Mrs. Thompson, may I ask if there was some problem with your daughter? Because this is a very... What? Very drastic, very cruel." I laughed. "Dr. Martinez, my daughter told me 3 days ago that I'm not welcome at her Christmas because I don't have enough class to be in the presence of her in-laws. The in-laws who got to know her luxurious house, her imported car, and the lifestyle she could never have maintained without my money." He wrote something down. "I understand. And this is a definitive decision. Completely definitive. I want it to be very clear in the will. Rebecca Thompson Miller is explicitly excluded from any inheritance. $0, 0 properties. And if she contests it, that's why I'm here. Doctor, I want this document to be uncontestable. I want it to be clear that I am in full use of my mental faculties and that this is a conscious and deliberate decision." Dr. Smith made more notes. "Very well. I need to warn you that there's a fee for this type of more detailed will, about $500. "No problem." And there really wasn't. After all, I had just saved $2,400 a month. $500 was little to ensure that my daughter would never see a cent of what I worked my whole life to save. "May I ask how much we're talking about in terms of inheritance?" I had done the math the night before. My savings account had about $85,000 plus the retirement plan, which should have about $60,000. My apartment was paid off and was worth approximately $120,000 in the current market. Life insurance of $50,000. Total, a little over $300,000. $300,000 that I had saved working day and night, economizing on everything, living simply. $300,000 that my daughter was counting on being hers one day, not even imagining that she herself had dug her own financial grave. "And are you absolutely certain of this decision, Mrs. Thompson?" "Doctor, I have worked as a nurse for 32 years. I have seen families destroy themselves over money. Children who only show up when they need something. People who treat relatives like personal banks. My daughter turned me into exactly that. A personal bank. And personal banks don't deserve to be loved or respected. Just used." He finished writing and looked at me. "Very well. I'll prepare the documents. I can have everything ready by Friday." Perfect. When I left his office, I felt like I had just done the smartest thing of my life. Rebecca had taught me that love meant nothing if it didn't come accompanied by money. Very well. She was going to learn that disrespect also had a price. Friday, I returned to the office to sign the will. Dr. Smith had done an impeccable job. The document made crystal clear that Rebecca Thompson Miller was completely excluded from the inheritance due to a consistent pattern of disrespect and financial exploitation of the testator. "Done," he said when I finished signing. "This will is registered and valid. Do you want a copy?" "I want 2 copies. One I'll keep at home, another in my safe deposit box at the bank." When I got home with the documents, I felt renewed. In 1 week, I had completely cut the financial ties that bound me to a daughter who was ashamed of me. I kept one copy of the will in my dresser drawer along with other important documents, and the other copy went straight to the bank safe on Monday. You know what impressed me most? How much better I slept now. I no longer had that constant anxiety of knowing whether the money would be enough to pay my bills and hers, too. I no longer had to worry if she would call asking for just one more little favor that would cost another few hundred. During the following 2 weeks, I lived a peace I hadn't known in years. I woke up, went to work, came home, and the money I earned was mine. I started making plans. Maybe a trip to the mountains in the spring. Maybe trade my old car for a newer one. Maybe even give my apartment a makeover. I bought new clothes for myself. Nothing too expensive, but pretty pieces that made me feel good. I started going to the beauty salon once a month. Small luxuries I had denied myself while supporting my daughter's lifestyle. Rebecca didn't call once during those 2 weeks. She was probably too busy entertaining her in-laws and pretending she had her own money to maintain that whole life. Or maybe she was still angry with me for buying cheap gifts and refusing to go there and take the blame. I didn't care. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't care if my daughter was mad at me. She had taught me that I only served to be used. So now she was going to learn to live without using me. The will was safe in the bank vault, patiently waiting for the day Rebecca would discover that every time she humiliated me, treated me like a servant, or pretended I didn't exist when she didn't need money, each of those times had cost exactly $300,000. And you know what? I didn't feel even a bit of remorse. 2 months passed since that conversation about Christmas. 2 months of peace, of sleeping well, of not having to worry if my account would be in the red because I was supporting 2 households. I was in the middle of a shift at the hospital when my cell phone vibrated. It was Rebecca. I answered during my break outside in the parking lot, enjoying the fresh February air. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was different. It wasn't that tone of superiority I had gotten used to hearing in recent years. There was something there. Desperation. "Hi, Rebecca. How are you?" "Mom, I need to talk to you about something. The money. Last month's transfer didn't arrive in my account." Finally. I had wondered how long it would take for her to notice the tap had dried up. "What transfer, dear?" "Mom, you know what transfer I'm talking about? The $2,100 you always send." I thought it was some problem with the bank, but now it's February 7th and nothing has arrived. "Oh, that transfer. I canceled it." Silence on the other end of the line. A long and tense silence. "What do you mean you canceled it?" "I canceled the automatic transfer, Rebecca, on the day you told me I didn't have enough class to be at your family's Christmas." "Mom, that has nothing to do with one thing and the other." "Nothing to do with it?" Of course not. For her, it was perfectly normal to humiliate me and still expect me to continue paying her bills. For me, it has everything to do with it. "Rebecca, you told me I'm an embarrassment to your sophisticated family. So I decided to stop embarrassing you with my money, too." "Mom, you can't do this. You know we count on that money." "Count on my money. Not appreciate my money. Not are grateful for my help. Count on my money as if it were an acquired right. Rebecca, you're 32 years old. You're married to a man who works at a good company. Why do you count on money from a classless nurse?" "It's not like that, Mom." "No? Then how is it?" "Because from my point of view, you spent the last 4 years using me as a personal bank while pretending I wasn't good enough to be part of your family." I heard her breathe deeply on the other side. When she spoke again, her voice was louder, more desperate. "Mom, you don't understand. We have commitments. The house financing, David's car, credit cards. Without your money, we can't pay for everything." "And what's my problem, Rebecca?" "What do you mean, what's your problem?" "I'm your daughter. You're my daughter when you need money. When it comes to including me in the family, treating me with respect, valuing me, then I'm just an embarrassment." "Mom, stop it. You're distorting everything." "Distorting?" I laughed bitterly. "Rebecca, you literally told me I couldn't go to Christmas because I don't have enough class. Your husband said my nurse way didn't match the successful executives. How exactly am I distorting this?" That was a misunderstanding." It wasn't a misunderstanding at all. You were very clear and I understood the message perfectly. Mom, listen. We can talk about this in person. Come to my house. Let's have lunch together. Like old times. Like old times when I also paid the restaurant bill. No, Rebecca. I won't go to your house anymore. I won't fund anything for you anymore. You're adults. Figure it out. Mom! Her voice was almost screaming now. You can't simply stop helping us. We're going to get into debt. Then ask for help from David's refined parents or from the successful executives. People with enough class, unlike me. You know they won't lend us money. And I should lend? Why? Because I'm a sucker? Because I'm easy to manipulate? Because you're my mother. I am your mother when you need money, Rebecca. The rest of the time, I'm just an embarrassment who can't be present at the important occasions of your life. Mom, this isn't fair. It isn't fair. After 4 years of bleeding me financially, after humiliating me in front of my son-in-law, after excluding me from Christmas with my own family, she was telling me I was being unfair. You know what isn't fair, Rebecca? It isn't fair for a daughter to treat her mother like a personal bank. It isn't fair to make me pay for a house where I'm not welcome. It isn't fair for you to live at my expense and still have the nerve to say I don't have class. Mom, you're exaggerating. Am I? Rebecca, in the last 4 years, you received more than $120,000 from my account. $120,000 that I worked 60 hours a week to earn. And in exchange for what? Being treated like a servant when you need something and like an embarrassment when you don't. Silence again, this time longer. $120,000? Her voice came out in a whisper. That's right, $120,000. I did the math. Want me to send you the statement so you can see? Mom, I didn't know it was so much. Of course you knew, Rebecca. You just didn't care. As long as the money arrived, it didn't matter if I was killing myself working to pay for your luxurious life. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. And it's over. Not one more cent will come out of my account for you. Never again. Mom, you can't do this to me. If you stop helping, we're going to lose the house. Then you'll learn to live within your means like normal adults do. Mom, please. I'm begging you. And that's when she said the thing I'll never forget. The thing that confirmed I had made the right decision. If you don't start sending the money again, I'll never talk to you again. Never again. You're going to lose your daughter forever. Lose my daughter? As if I hadn't lost her long ago. The day she decided money was more important than respect. Rebecca, I said, and my voice came out calmer than I expected. If the only reason you talk to me is money, then I lost my daughter long ago. The difference is that now I know it. And I hung up the phone. I stood there in the hospital parking lot for a few minutes looking at the phone in my hand. For years of manipulation had just been summed up in a threat. Give me money or lose your daughter. Well, she had made her choice, and so had I. The following week, Rebecca called 3 more times. I answered the first one out of curiosity to see if she had changed her strategy. Mom, I was thinking about what you said, and you're right about some things. We really didn't treat you well, and I'm sorry for that. But you can't punish us financially because of it. Punish financially? As if I had an obligation to support them forever. Rebecca, I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply stopping funding the life of 2 adults who are ashamed of me. We are not ashamed of you. Yes, you are. You're so ashamed of me that you don't even want me at your own family's Christmas. Mom, that was a misunderstanding. We can have another Christmas, just the 3 of us, to make up for it. I don't want a make-up Christmas, Rebecca, and I don't want to be treated like a servant that you pay with fake smiles and empty promises anymore. Then what do you want? What do I need to do for you to start helping us again? What I wanted. After 4 years, she was finally asking what I wanted. I want you to learn to live with your own money. I want you to grow up and, mainly, I want you to leave me alone. Mom, that's cruel. Cruel was you using me as a personal bank for 4 years. Cruel was excluding me from Christmas. Cruel was your husband saying I don't have class. I'm just stopping being an idiot. I hung up again. The second call was 2 days later, and this time it was David on the phone. Mrs. Thompson, I need to talk to you. Talk, David. You can't simply stop helping Rebecca like this out of nowhere. This is irresponsible on your part. Irresponsible on my part. A 35-year-old man was calling me irresponsible for not wanting to pay his bills anymore. David, you are not my responsibility. You are married adults. But you always helped. Rebecca counts on that money. And you never thought about living without it? Never thought about making a budget based on your income? Not mine. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, David. It's very simple. You earn money. You only spend what you earn. Like everyone does. You're being vindictive because of that Christmas story. This is pettiness. Pettiness? After insulting me, excluding me, using me, he was accusing me of pettiness. David, you told me I don't have enough class to be in the presence of your family. Very well. People without class shouldn't pay the bills of people with class. Problem solved. You're distorting. I'm not distorting anything. I'm simply stopping being a sucker. I hung up. I blocked his number. The third call was a week later. Rebecca was crying. Mom, we're going to lose the house. The bank sent a notification. If we don't pay the overdue amounts by the end of the month, they're going to foreclose. Part of me felt a pang of, it wasn't exactly pity. It was more like a distant sadness. Like when you see a tragic news story on television about people you don't know. I'm sorry to hear that, Rebecca. Mom, can you help us one last time? Just this once. I promise. No. Mom, please. It's only $8,000 to bring everything up to date. $8,000. For months of what I used to send them. Money I had in my account. Money that could solve their problem temporarily. Rebecca, if I give you those $8,000 today, how long will it take until you need more money? It won't be necessary. We learned our lesson. You learned what lesson? That you can mistreat me all you want because in the end, I always pay your bills. It's not that. It's exactly that, Rebecca. You think you can humiliate me, disrespect me, exclude me from the family, and even so, I'll be here to solve your financial problems. Mom, I can't lose my house. Then ask for money from David's sophisticated parents, or sell the imported car, or get a second job. Do what normal adults do when they have financial problems. You know they won't lend money. And why should I lend? Because I'm more of a sucker than they are? Because you're my mother. Rebecca, listen carefully to what I'm going to say because this is the last time we're going to have this conversation. My voice came out firm, definitive. You made a choice when you decided I wasn't good enough to be in your family. You made a choice when you allowed your husband to insult me to my face. You made a choice when you treated me like a servant for 4 years. Mom! Now I'm also making a choice. It's not my problem if you're going to lose the house. You have a wonderful husband and refined in-laws who think you're better company than me. Ask them for help. I don't exist for you anymore. Remember that's what you taught me. Mom, please don't do this to me. Goodbye, Rebecca. Good luck. I hung up and blocked her number, too. 3 years have passed since that last conversation. 3 wonderful years. With the $2,400 monthly that no longer left my account, I managed to completely renovate my apartment. I changed all the furniture, painted the walls, put in new flooring. Now I have a house that is truly mine. Decorated my way, paid for with my money. I traveled to the mountains in Colorado twice. I visited the Grand Canyon. I went on a Caribbean cruise last year. I always wanted to travel, but never had money left over. Now I do. I bought a new car, a 2024 blue Honda Civic that I simply loved from the moment I saw it at the dealership. I paid cash with money I had been saving for 2 years. I retired at 61, earlier than I had planned, because I discovered that my retirement plus my savings were enough to live comfortably without working 60 hours a week. Sometimes I run into acquaintances in town who ask about Rebecca. How is your daughter? I haven't seen her in a while. My answer is always the same, said with a genuine smile. I don't have a daughter. At first, people were confused, thought I was joking. Over time, they understood it was serious. I stopped receiving questions about her. I know from other people's comments that Rebecca and David really lost the house. I know they moved to a smaller apartment. I know David had to sell the imported car. I know Rebecca went back to working full-time. I don't feel sorry. I don't feel remorse. I don't feel nostalgia. I feel, for the first time in years, peace. Yesterday, I was organizing my documents and found an old photo of Rebecca as a child smiling at the camera with 2 baby teeth missing. For a moment, I felt a pang of something, nostalgia, maybe. Then I remembered her voice on the phone. "You don't have enough class to be at our Christmas." I tore up the photo and threw it in the trash. This morning I woke up, made my coffee, sat on the balcony of my renovated apartment, and planned my next trip. I'm thinking about Europe. I always wanted to see Paris. At 61, I finally learned that family isn't who shares blood with you. Family is who respects you, values you, wants you around, not for what you can give, but for who you are. I don't have biological family, but I have a good life. A life that is mine. Paid for with my money. Decorated with my taste. Lived on my terms. Rebecca taught me that I wasn't good enough for her. I learned that she wasn't good enough for me, and I'm very well this way. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My husband thought that since I was an orphan, I would never leave him. So, when his childhood sweetheart deliberately fell down the stairs to frame me, he used the threat of divorce to force me to apologize. However, I didn't offer any explanation. I simply grabbed my bag and signed. The family was shocked by my actions. They expected me to resist signing the divorce papers, but instead, I did it without hesitation. Eduardo was the most surprised. The moment I signed, a strange feeling took over his chest, leaving him uneasy. "Didn't you read the agreement?" Eduardo asked, curiosity in his voice. I wiped the tears from my face and, with a dazzling smile, replied, "I may be poor, hell, an orphan, but when I saved your grandmother's life, I didn't expect anything in return. She asked me to marry you to cover my school expenses, but I don't need your money anymore." I looked at him, my eyes filled with determination. Then, unexpectedly, I emptied the contents of my backpack on the floor. To his surprise, there were only textbooks and pens inside. "When I came into this house, I had nothing but this," I continued. "I knew you'd never accept me as your daughter-in-law, so I tried to fit in. I became your maid. I did everything without question. But in return, I got nothing but humiliation." I paused, then added, "Everyone thought I married your son for money. Well, here's all your money back. I, Leisha, swear I never spent a single penny from any of you." I handed Eduardo a small notebook and 1 bank card. "This notebook contains every cent you gave me. I never used it. I opened an account and deposited the money. I thought there would come a time when you'd care for me in return, but I was wrong. I'm giving it all back." I turned to Dona Helena, who was holding a card in her hands, feeling the weight like a burden. I spoke with icy calm. "Mrs. Helena, you agreed to pay for my tuition in exchange for marrying your grandson. I didn't need it. Now, I'm giving everything back." Dona Helena was moved to tears, but I paid no attention. My heart was hardened by betrayal. "How do we know this card actually works?" questioned Renata, always obsessed with money. I turned and gave her a cold look, making Renata shrink in her seat. "You can check at the bank. I'm not afraid of losing wealth. I'm not like you who's terrified of poverty." Everyone was stunned by the new side they were seeing of me. I looked different. Strong, unshakable, and confident. Then I fixed my eyes on Fabiana, who looked fragile and weak in Eduardo's arms. I noticed a faint smile on Fabiana's face. Everything hit me at once. Fabiana had faked her injuries to frame me and manipulate Eduardo into divorcing me. Rage welled up inside me. I walked toward Eduardo and Fabiana, my fury obvious. Fabiana trembled and Juliana smirked with malice, regretting the divorce now that it's too late. Ignoring Juliana, I stared straight at Fabiana. "Did I push you, miss? Did I?" I asked, my voice dripping with ice. Fabiana shrank back, her performance faltering as she stopped. "I'm scared. Please make her leave," she cried. Eduardo's voice was cold. Leisha, you already signed the papers. What more do you want? I laughed. But there was no joy, just bitter pain. My laughter stopped abruptly and, without warning, I slapped Fabiana across the face. The sound echoed through the room, leaving everyone stunned. Eduardo was furious. Leisha, he shouted, getting up to confront me. But unfazed, I raised my hand and slapped him too, shocking the entire family. It was the first time anyone had dared to hit him, let alone his ex-wife. Miss, that slap was for falsely accusing me, I said coldly. If I had known you were planning to frame me, I would have pushed you down the stairs myself. You don't deserve to be here playing with people's lives to get your way. I turned to Eduardo, my eyes piercing. You not only chose her over me, but you conspired with her to destroy me. I may be poor, but I know what it means to be human. I'm not as ruthless as your lover who's willing to go that far to deceive and hurt me. You two deserve each other. My voice trembled with emotion. I stand for peace. I won't seek revenge, but I'm done with this family. We're strangers now. From now on, if our paths ever cross again, I'll destroy you. I'll destroy us both if I have to. With those final words, I turned away, my heart heavy with pain and anger. I walked toward the door, leaving the family speechless behind me. Standing in the rain, I looked up at the sky, my tears mixing with the storm. After everything I did for them, is this how it ends? I mocked myself, laughing bitterly. Then I called my best friend, Enrique, to come pick me up. Inside the mansion, Eduardo watched me from the window. My hunched figure under the rain, waiting for Enrique, awakened something in him. Eduardo clenched his fists. Why does this feel so wrong? Why does she look so broken? Just then, a white car pulled up outside. A tall, handsome man stepped out with an umbrella. I couldn't feel my feet. The rain was pouring so hard it soaked every inch of my body. But still, I stood there on the sidewalk waiting for Enrique. It wasn't just about the ride. It was about pride. I wanted that family to see one last time that I wasn't going to beg, that I wasn't going to plead, that my pain was quiet but full of dignity. Enrique pulled up slowly, got out with an umbrella, and rushed toward me. He looked at me with wide eyes, a mix of shock and fury. Leisha, what did they do to you? I just smiled. A hollow, empty smile. One I couldn't even tell if it was irony, exhaustion, or some twisted sense of survival. I got into the car without saying a word. Enrique turned on the heater and offered me his jacket, but I refused. In that moment, I needed to feel the cold. I needed it to remind me that this wasn't just a nightmare, that it was real, that I had truly lived through hell in what I now called in my mind the Lion's Mansion. A family that had devoured me piece by piece. Want to go to my place or back to Dona Olivia's boarding house? He asked, driving slowly. Dona Olivia, I replied. At least there, no one would ask questions. At least there, I could be invisible again, and that invisibility had started to feel like freedom. When I arrived, I went straight up to the tiny room I had rented before the marriage. It felt like going back in time, only now with his soul completely shattered. Enrique didn't insist on coming up. He knew my silences. He left me with a kiss on the forehead and a quiet, "Call me if you need anything." As soon as I closed the door, my body collapsed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there on the floor, soaked hair dripping, staring at the stained ceiling like it was somehow more comforting than Eduardo's arms had ever been. How could he? How could he? Days passed in silence. I didn't go out, I barely ate. I just slept and woke up in the same spot. Enrique came by, dropped food at the door, sent messages. I didn't answer. How could I speak to the world when I couldn't even face myself? On the fourth morning, my phone buzzed nonstop messages, calls. Enrique, open the door. It's urgent. I dragged myself to the door and unlocked it. Enrique rushed in holding his phone. You need to see this, he said, showing me the screen. A video, Fabiana in the hospital wearing a neck brace, performing for a local reporter. I just wanted to help, but she hated me for being close to Eduardo. She pushed me, I feared for my life. I just want justice. I felt sick. Fabiana, who had faked the whole thing, was now playing the victim on live TV, and worse, people were buying it. The comments were brutal. Poor woman. Another jealous psycho. Eduardo got out just in time. They're painting you as unstable Leisha, like the slap was just the beginning of something much darker, Enrique said through clenched teeth. Eduardo hasn't said a word. He's not defending you. I sat on the edge of the bed. My heart pounded in my chest. They were destroying me again, but this time it wasn't behind closed doors. It was, and he knew the truth. He had seen it, and still he remained silent. They won't stop, Enrique. They want to erase me. First, they humiliated me. Then they discarded me. Now they're turning me into a criminal, and he's letting them. Enrique just looked at me like he was waiting for what came next. But I didn't know. Not yet. The next morning, I got up early and returned to the university. They welcomed me with caution. They knew Eduardo's family had funded my education, but they never knew why. I reactivated my enrollment using the money I had saved. The same money I had refused to use before because deep down, I knew I'd need it to start over. People stared at me in the hallways, whispered, looked me up and down, but I walked with my head held high, even if inside I felt like ashes. During one of my law classes, the professor asked me to stay after. I thought it would be a warning, but he closed the door and said, Leisha, I read your paper from last semester, and I've seen the news. I know you're being treated unfairly. If you want help, I know a good lawyer. And in that moment, I realized something. Maybe I had lost one battle, but I wasn't done yet. There were still fights ahead, and this time I had allies. That night, back at the boarding house, I sat down with Enrique and told him everything. He listened quietly, then he looked me straight in the eyes and asked, Do you want justice or revenge? I didn't hesitate. Both. Without another word, he smirked and placed a folder on the table. Then let's begin planning. Revenge isn't like in the movies. There's no dramatic music, no fiery speeches, no explosive rage. The silence, it's cold clarity. It's when the pain no longer burns but sharpens. When grief becomes calculation and betrayal becomes a weapon you learn to aim. After that night, I sat down with Enrique in the small room at the boarding house. The walls were thin and the rain outside tapped steadily like a heartbeat, reminding me that time was moving forward whether I was ready or not. Enrique opened a folder slowly. There were no names inside, just outlines, questions, and risks. But the first thing he said rewired something in my brain. They used her pain to tell a false story. Now, you're going to use that same story to destroy them. I didn't respond. I just nodded. We started from the beginning. Enrique took notes while I finally recounted everything I had endured in that house. Not with tears, but with focus. The humiliation, the way Renata constantly reminded me I was just an orphan, Juliana's passive-aggressive comments during dinners, the way Dona Helena cloaked commands in kind advice, Eduardo's quiet indifference disguised as affection, and of course the final blow, Fabiana. Every name, every scene, every cold glance was documented. Enrique treated it like building a case not just legally but morally. He wasn't just a friend. He was the first person to look at me and see a whole woman, even if I was shattered. You're not just trying to clear your name anymore, Enrique said, writing one word in big bold letters across the top of the page. Credibility. Their credibility is their shield. Your downfall was built on that shield. If we crack it, the rest will collapse. In the days that followed, Enrique took me to a small, no-frills law firm. That's where I met Marcos. He was sharp, quiet, and had zero tolerance for rich people who thought they were above consequences. I've seen families like this, he said during our first meeting. They use money and image to control everything. If you want to take them down, it won't be with rage. It'll be with strategy, precision. And so we started digging. Old text messages, bank records, email exchanges showing how Fabiana had reinserted herself into Eduardo's life well before the staircase incident. Recordings of Dona Helena pressuring me to know my place. Bit by bit, we began connecting the dots of a web they thought no one could untangle. Enrique built a second file, the image file. We tracked public appearances, media coverage, charity events. Renata was on a local women's business board and loved pretending she supported underprivileged women. Juliana posted motivational quotes about empathy, but we found audio of her mocking me behind closed doors. And Eduardo with his press suits and gentle voice, always looked so honorable. That was his mask. But the worst discovery was about Fabiana. Since her hospital interview, she'd gone silent online, but Enrique, always resourceful, contacted an old classmate of hers. That's when we learned Fabiana was now trying to partner with women's rights organizations, using my name and our incident as the foundation of her new persona. She was turning the story she fabricated into a platform. She wanted to be a symbol, a martyr. I felt sick. She's manipulating real people now, Enrique warned. You're not just fighting a family anymore, you're fighting a narrative. People will defend her because they believe she's a survivor. I know, I said without blinking. That's when Marcos leaned forward and said the sentence that would define our entire strategy. If she wants to be a symbol, we'll make sure the world knows it's a lie. But slowly. First, we plant the doubt. Then we deliver the truth. That night, I returned to the room alone. I lay on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling like I used to when I wanted to disappear. But I didn't want to disappear anymore. I wanted them to feel what I felt that day in the rain. The whole world watching you fall and no one reaching out. The difference was I survived. They won't be so lucky, and they have no idea what's coming. They thought I would disappear, that the rain that soaked me that night had washed away my dignity too, that I would become just another rejected woman humiliated and silenced by a carefully crafted narrative. What they didn't know was that every tear I cried had turned into strategy, and now I was ready to return everything. Not with shouting, not with threats, but with truth. Cold, undeniable public truth. The first piece on the board was Fabiana. She was the foundation of the lie, the perfect victim, the fragile, sweet, heartbroken woman. But her mask had a crack, and I knew exactly where to press. Enrique created a fake profile on a social media page focused on women's advocacy. A believable name, a solid backstory. He started liking Fabiana's posts, commenting with admiration. She fell for it instantly. In her mind, she was gaining another supporter. And then Enrique, with Marcos's help, struck. A post appeared on that profile, an anonymous article titled, "When the Victim Lies, the Other Side of the Story." It didn't mention names, just told a very familiar tale, eerily similar to hers, but from the perspective of the woman falsely accused. It ended with a simple question. What if not every woman who claims to have been pushed is telling the truth? The reaction was immediate. The comments exploded. Some people defended Fabiana, but others started to question. This sounds too familiar. Why was there never a video of the fall? Why has the ex-husband never spoken up? She stayed silent for 2 days. On the third, she posted a tearful statement using the same hospital photos from before, claiming how hard it was to be discredited and re-traumatized. And that's when Enrique dropped the bomb. A screenshot of Fabiana at a party, laughing, dancing, taken on the exact date she claimed to be bedridden. The source? One of her old friends who posted it without realizing what Fabiana had been pretending. The internet did the rest. Her credibility collapsed. Organizations that once wanted her for speaking engagements quickly distanced themselves. Eduardo's silence was now seen as complicity. And me? I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The seed of doubt had been planted and it was blooming. But that wasn't enough. I wanted more. Next was Renata, the self-proclaimed businesswoman who empowers young women. Enrique found out that her company hired unpaid interns, forced them to work long hours, and even made them pay for their uniforms. Marcos gathered documentation, testimonies from former interns, screenshots, everything. We published it on a labor rights blog. The post gained traction fast. The very next day, Renata lost a massive contract with a brand that refused to work with exploitative companies. Then came Juliana. She was easy. Enrique unearthed an audio recording from a party where she laughed and said, "Leisha thought she was going to be a princess. Ended up as a maid with a ring." The clip went viral. Juliana tried to deny it, claiming it was edited. Enrique, with a tech expert friend, proved it wasn't. She was removed from a youth business association and her name became synonymous with elitist cruelty. By now, the family's public image was in ruins, but the main event was still ahead. Eduardo, the man who stood in silence, who watched it all happen, who let them tear me apart so he could protect his precious reputation. Marcos managed to obtain a copy of our prenuptial agreement. One clause was clear. Any proof of infidelity during the marriage would void post-divorce benefits. Enrique, through some digging, got a hold of Eduardo's and Fabiana's message logs, flirty, intimate exchanges weeks before the alleged fall, including one on the exact day of the accident. Marcos called Eduardo to a legal meeting. He arrived calm, wearing his usual smug smile, thinking it was about money. But when he saw the documents, the proof, the timestamps, the undeniable truth, he turned pale. "This could destroy my name," he said, visibly shaking. "Exactly," I replied, using the same soft tone he once used when he told me to be understanding at his family dinners. He tried to offer a settlement, a lot of money. He said he'd pay whatever I wanted if I just kept this private. I smiled and declined. "I don't want your money, Eduardo. I want the world to know who you really are." I stood, looked him in the eyes one last time and said, "You let them humiliate me. You watched me fall alone in the rain. Now it's your turn to feel the cold." And I walked out. For the first time, I felt no fear, no guilt. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was delivering justice. Fabiana disappeared from the internet. Renata lost 2 lawsuits filed by her former interns. Juliana deactivated all her accounts and now sells secondhand clothes online. Eduardo started appearing in news articles with headlines like, "The man who stayed silent, when complicity speaks louder than words." And me? I went back to school. I landed an internship at a law firm that saw courage in me, not scandal. Enrique stayed by my side, and every time the anger tried to come back, I remembered one thing. They thought I'd beg, but the ones begging now aren't me. They always said I was nothing, that because I was an orphan I should be grateful, that being with Eduardo was an opportunity, that I should learn to stay quiet, smile, and accept my place. I heard it in so many ways, whispered, dressed up as advice, delivered with fake concern. Constant reminders of where I came from as if that decided where I was allowed to go. But now, watching each of them unravel in their own lies, I realized how wrong they were. Being an orphan didn't make me weak. It's exactly what made me strong. Abandonment taught me how to survive. Loneliness taught me not to expect anything from anyone. And pain taught me how to stand back up with clenched fists and a steady heart. The following months were like breathing for the first time. I returned to university, this time with a full scholarship. Not because someone felt sorry for me, but because I earned it. My name started circulating among professors and academic boards. One of my papers on justice and psychological violence was published in the faculty's law journal. Enrique, still by my side, became not just my best friend but my business partner. Together, we launched a small legal advocacy project for women like me who had been silenced, erased, or manipulated by those in power. One morning, while I was having breakfast in the kitchen of the boarding house, Donna Olivia looked at me with teary eyes and said, "When you arrived here, you looked like a little bird with a broken wing. Now look at you, you're a storm." And I smiled, truly smiled for the first time in a long while. Because yes, I had become the storm they feared. Eduardo eventually requested a leave of absence from his family's company. Sponsors began to withdraw after the scandals. The image he had built so carefully crumbled quietly. No explosive headlines needed, just truth, slow and steady, eating away at the foundation. Fabiana tried to reinvent herself as an advocate in another city. It didn't work. Wherever she went, someone already knew the truth. The real story traveled faster than her carefully staged one. She became a shadow of the character she tried to play. Renata found herself buried in lawsuits and labor audits. The woman who once spoke about empowering women now flinched at every email she received. Juliana vanished from public view. Last I heard, she was living with an aunt in the countryside, offline, avoiding everyone since the audio went viral. And me? I never had to touch them, never had to scream, never needed drama. All I had to do was be the woman they underestimated, the orphan who never belonged to anyone and still stood tall. One quiet afternoon, as Enrique and I sat at our small new office, he looked at me over his coffee and asked, "So, what are you going to do now that you're free?" I looked out the window. The sky was cloudy, just like the day everything ended. But this time it wasn't raining inside me. This time I wasn't trembling. I was whole. "Now I live," I said, "because I owed them nothing. No explanations, no guilt, no pain. I exposed them, I faced them. They dragged me to the bottom and I climbed out with my own hands. They always said I had no one, but they were wrong. I always had myself, and now they have nothing." End of the revenge, beginning of my story. What was left after the revenge? Silence, peace, a kind of emptiness that, for the first time, didn't hurt. It felt like I had spent years holding my breath and finally I could exhale. No more surprise visits, judgmental stares, or manipulative messages. The ghosts had gone quiet and I was still standing, for real this time. For a while, I thought I'd be alone forever. That after everything I'd been through, no one could ever really reach me. But the truth wasn't about the world. It was about me. I was still living in survival mode, heart in a trench, waiting for the next attack. But Enrique, he was never a threat. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't make promises or give dramatic speeches. He just stayed. He was there on the good days and the days when I didn't speak at all. He was there when I laughed and also when I broke a glass and collapsed into tears like the world was ending. He would just look at me and say, "It's okay, Leisha. I'm here." And he always was. The first time I noticed something had shifted was on a random night after a long meeting with a client. We were both exhausted, sitting on the office couch, eating cold pizza, and laughing at something silly. I can't even remember. He looked at me just a second longer than usual. I felt it, and instead of looking away, I looked back. There was no tension, no fear, just calm. Enrique felt like home, but he was also something new, something I never had before. Safety without control, presence without pressure, love without pity. Things didn't change overnight. There was no magical happily ever after. But slowly, without realizing it, we started sharing more than just an office. We started sharing a life. He began picking me up from evening classes at the university. He left a toothbrush at my apartment. And when I got sick and he stayed by my side for 3 days straight without complaint, I knew he was already part of my life, quietly, naturally, and completely. One afternoon, months after everything had happened, we were walking hand in hand downtown. We passed a newsstand, and on the cover of a magazine in small print was Eduardo's name, part of a feature about public figures in decline. I paused for a second, looked at it, and kept walking. Enrique gave my hand a gentle squeeze and said, with that crooked smile I'd grown to love, "Not even worth the energy anymore, huh?" I smiled back. I barely remember that life. And it was true. I had forgotten what they did to me, but I no longer needed to carry it. The wound had healed, and even though the revenge had once given me strength, it wasn't what fueled me anymore. Now I found power in the little things. A warm cup of coffee at the end of the day, a random text during work, the smell of Enrique sleeping beside me. It wasn't a fairy tale, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was mine. For a long time, I thought the only way to move on was by shouting my pain to the world. But sometimes the real beginning comes in silence, when you finally give yourself permission to leave the past where it belongs. And if someone asks me whether I still think about that family, that house, that stormy night, yes, sometimes I do, but only with the kind of detachment you feel when remembering an old dream, because now, I've finally woken up. Time passed. Not like in a movie. No grand finales or dramatic plot twists. It passed quietly through slow mornings, small routines, steady breaths. Life found its rhythm again. I moved forward, but sometimes, even when there's no more anger, curiosity lingers. What happened to them? The ones who once thought they were untouchable? The ones who thought I'd never rise? The answer is simple. The truth always comes for everyone, and the best part, I didn't have to do a thing. Fabiana, for starters, tried everything to rebuild herself. She moved cities, changed her appearance, tried to rebrand as an activist online. She posted videos with tearful speeches, shared inspirational quotes, but the cracks in her story were impossible to cover. The brands backed off, her followers disappeared, people whispered her name like a warning. Last I heard, she was living with an aunt, avoiding cameras, interviews, and anything resembling the spotlight. The role of victim had become too heavy even for her. Renata, the so-called business icon, fell from grace fast. Labor lawsuits piled up. Former interns spoke out about abuse, exploitation, mistreatment. The women's leadership group she used to brag about dissolved in silence. She tried launching an online store, but with no support, no partners, no name to lean on, it all faded. Now she lives quietly, far from the boardrooms and bright lights she once ruled. Juliana, she vanished completely after her cruel audio went viral. Brands dropped her instantly. She tried rebranding as a self-love coach, but it didn't last. No one believed her anymore. Rumors say she lives with a distant relative in a small town, without social media, rarely leaving the house. And honestly, I don't hate her. I feel sorry for her. She spent so long pretending to be above everyone that when she fell, she had no idea who she was without the applause. And Eduardo, the man who watched me break. He tried to rebuild his reputation, of course. Took a break from the family business for personal reasons. But everyone knew why. People stopped trusting him, not because of what he did, but because of what he didn't do, because he stayed silent when he should have spoken. That silence became his legacy. He tried to remarry twice. Neither relationship lasted, not because of betrayal, but because no one wanted to be with a man who stood by and let his wife be destroyed. The new generation called him out. The older one turned their backs. He faded slowly, shrinking into a version of himself even he didn't recognize. The man who once said I needed him is now the one left with nothing. And me? I lived, I grew, I rebuilt. Enrique and I built something real. We made mistakes, we laughed, we healed together. We created a project that helps women like me, women who were silenced, dismissed, erased. I turned my pain into purpose. I never returned to that house. I never looked back with hurt, only with distance. The past is still there, but it doesn't own me. It simply reminds me of what I survived, that I was stronger than all of it, that the name Leisha, the one they tried to shame, now stands tall on its own. And if I could go back and speak to that version of me, the one soaked in the rain, holding a divorce paper, alone and broken, I'd whisper just one thing. You didn't lose, you were set free. And time proved it to everyone. I've thought many times about how to end the story. For so long, I imagined what I'd say if I ever made it here. Alive, whole, strong. But now that I'm here, looking back, I realize the most powerful words aren't the ones that hurt. They're the ones that set you free. I'm not a hero. I'm not perfect. Nor am I some flawless symbol of survival. I fell hard. I was humiliated, betrayed, ignored. I was torn down by people I once respected, and when I thought I couldn't fall any further, I did. But I survived not because someone came to save me, but because I chose not to let myself die inside. I was used, manipulated, discarded by a family who thought they were too important to care about someone like me. But in the end, they were the ones who crumbled under the weight of their own lies. And you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the public shame. It was how much I erased myself just to be accepted. How small I made myself trying to fit, thinking that if I was quiet enough, kind enough, good enough, someone would finally choose me. But you don't win by shrinking. You win when you finally realize you never needed to be chosen, you just needed to choose yourself. If there's one thing this story taught me, it's that not every wound needs revenge, but every wound needs a lesson. I didn't become strong by hurting them back. I became strong the moment I understood my worth. And today, I don't need Eduardo's apology. I don't need Juliana's approval. I don't need Renata's recognition, because the one person I truly needed to see me finally does. Me. With all the scars, with all the mistakes, and with all the strength it took to start over. This story ends here, but my life doesn't. It moves forward with love, with freedom, with truth, and with one final promise. I will never be silent again. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My family wants me to cancel my wedding date so my sister can get married first. I'm a 28-year-old guy and my fiancé and I have been engaged for about 18 months. We've been together for years and the plan has always been to get married next spring. We've already booked the venue, paid the deposit for the caterer, and locked in a photographer. All the big stuff is done. So, I was starting to feel like we could just relax and enjoy the countdown to our wedding day. But then all H broke loose. To set the stage a little, my family is big and pretty close. We have a lot of traditions and weddings are a huge deal. My sister, who's 25, just got engaged recently, and, while I'm happy for her, she's had a rough time trying to plan her wedding. The main issue is that she's been struggling to book a venue for the date she wants, and that's where the drama starts. She's been pretty vocal about being envious of the venue we booked. Every time she brings it up, she calls it perfect and goes on about how her family can afford something like that. I didn't think much of it. Lots of people talk about wedding envy when they're planning, right? But I didn't realize how deep her jealousy went until a family dinner a couple of weeks ago. We're all sitting there having a pretty normal meal when my mom starts making this weird speech about how amazing it would be if my sister could use our venue. I'm sitting there, fork halfway to my mouth, thinking it's a joke, but she keeps going. She's talking about how my sister is younger and, since her fiancé is in the military, there's a chance he might be deployed soon. According to my mom, it just makes sense for her to get married first. And wouldn't it be so lovely if we moved our wedding date so my sister could have the venue? At this point, I'm still processing because my fiancé and I had this date booked for over a year and everything's paid for. But my mom is dead serious and my sister is sitting there nodding like it's a done deal. My fiancé is furious and I can't blame her. The whole thing is completely ridiculous. She doesn't even say a word at the table, just gives me a look that says, "Do not even entertain this idea." So, I politely but firmly tell my mom and sister that there's no way we're changing our wedding plans. And of course, my sister bursts into tears. Full-on waterworks. At the dinner table. She storms out, and my mom goes after her, throwing us the most disappointed look I've ever seen. The rest of the dinner is just awkward silence with my parents clearly uncomfortable but not saying much. I thought maybe that was the end of it, maybe my sister would cool down, realize how insane the whole idea was, and we could all move on. But no, the next day my phone is blowing up. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, you name it. It's all from various family members. And the general message is that I need to think about family unity and be the bigger person. My sister must have gotten to them first because everyone is acting like it's some small ask. Like all we have to do is snap our fingers and the wedding plans would magically change. Some of the messages are trying to guilt-trip me into giving in. It's just one small sacrifice for the sake of family harmony. They say, as if moving an entire wedding is no big deal. My mom calls and starts talking about how weddings are supposed to bring families together, not divide them. She's going on and on about how disappointed my grandmother would be if the family couldn't get along for such an important event. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there staring at my phone, feeling like I'm living in some kind of weird alternate universe. My fiancé is understandably furious about all of this. She doesn't even want me to entertain these conversations, and I don't blame her. It's our wedding and we've worked hard to make everything perfect for us. I'm feeling overwhelmed, so I do what any rational person does in the age of the internet. I turn to Reddit. I throw up a post explaining the situation, asking if I'm being unreasonable for refusing to change our wedding date. I'm half expecting people to say, "Yeah, family comes first, you should consider it." But the response is intense. The post blows up. People are furious on my behalf, telling me to stand my ground and not give in to this crazy request. Reddit support is great, but it also makes me realize how ridiculous this whole situation is. My sister even texts me and says either I give up the date or she won't come to the wedding, and she'll make sure the rest of the family doesn't either. I didn't think things could get worse, but now it feels like my whole family is turning against me because I won't let my sister hijack our wedding. At this point, I don't know what to do. I'm trying to stay calm and not let this ruin the excitement of our wedding, but the pressure is getting intense. My fiancé and I are on the same page, we're not changing anything. But with the family piling on the guilt and my sister basically threatening to blow everything up, it feels like this is just the beginning of a much bigger mess. I woke up the next morning to a phone buzzing nonstop on my nightstand. Half asleep, I reached over, thinking maybe it was work or a random spam call. But no, it was family again. More texts, more missed calls. My grandmother was leading the charge this time, urging me to do the right thing and keep the family together. It was like they'd all gotten the same script overnight. Everyone was suddenly on board with this idea that I should just hand over our wedding date like it was no big deal. The guilt trip was real and I could feel the pressure building. By mid-morning, I was trying to shake it off. But then my parents showed up at our place unannounced. They looked serious and I knew this wasn't going to be a casual visit. My fiancé and I let them in, and right away they jumped into this whole spiel about family traditions. My dad was saying how in our family it's always been customary for the younger sibling to marry first if they're ready. My mom was trying to be more emotional about it, saying how torn up the family is and how she's worried this whole situation is going to cause a permanent rift. It was heavy. My fiancé wasn't having any of it. She stood her ground, calmly but firmly, letting them know that we weren't going to move our wedding date. That conversation with my parents was just the beginning. My fiancé and I stood our ground, but the tension kept building. They left our house upset, clearly frustrated that we hadn't given in. I thought that maybe after venting, things would calm down, but that's not what happened. The next day, I got a message from a cousin saying he was organizing a family dinner that weekend and wanted me to attend. It felt like a trap, but I decided to go. I thought maybe in a calmer environment we could talk things out reasonably. My fiancée didn't want to go. She was tired of the whole situation, and honestly, I didn't blame her. When I arrived at the dinner, it became immediately clear that it was an ambush. Everyone was there, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and the topic was obvious before I even sat down. My mom started talking about how the family always overcomes difficulties and that the sacrifices of today are the foundation for a stronger family tomorrow. My grandmother, who has always been the matriarch of the family, looked me directly in the eye and said, "If you don't give in, Lucas, we will never be the same. You're tearing apart the harmony of our family." The atmosphere was tense and I knew I was about to be attacked from all sides. As I finally sat down, my sister started speaking. "Lucas, I understand you've planned your wedding, but this is bigger than you. It's our family. I'm not asking for much. I just want the chance to have the wedding I've always dreamed of before my fiancé is deployed. You can get married afterward, right? After all, true love waits." She said this with a smile on her face like she had already won. My stomach turned. She was manipulating the situation as if it were my responsibility, not hers, to fix her wedding issues. My blood started boiling, but I stayed calm. I knew that if I lost my temper, it would only make me look like the problem. "We're not changing our date," I said firmly. "Everything is paid for and we've been committed to this plan for over a year. It's not fair to ask us to throw everything away because of problems that aren't ours." My sister made a face as if I had said the most heartless thing in the world. Then, to my surprise, she started crying again. But this time it was different. It was a calculated cry, almost performative. She looked around the room as if I had hurt her irreparably. My aunts started shaking their heads in disapproval like I was the villain. My father, who had been silent up until then, stood up and said, "Lucas, if you go through with this wedding without changing the date, know that we won't be there to support you. You're breaking the family apart with your stubbornness." That was the final straw. I stood up, my heart pounding. "So that's it? You're all willing to emotionally blackmail me into destroying my own wedding plans rather than hold my sister accountable for her own? I'm the oldest, and if you think it's fair to put all this weight on my shoulders, then I'm the only one here who actually cares about what's right." My mom tried to intervene, her voice trembling with emotion. "Lucas, please, you know your grandmother can't handle seeing the family torn apart. If you go through with this, we'll never be the same." I was about to respond when something unexpected happened. My phone started ringing. It was my fiancée. I stepped away from the group and answered. Her voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Lucas, I love you. But if you keep giving space to this manipulation, it's going to tear us apart. We can't get married with this pressure on our backs. Either you put a stop to this or it's going to destroy us. It was an ultimatum I hadn't expected, but I knew she was right. I went back to the room and, without sitting down, said, "You want me to choose between my fiancé and my sister? Then I choose my fiancé. If you can't respect our plans, then you're not welcome at our wedding, and don't think I'm going to change my mind." The room fell silent. My sister wiped away her tears, glaring at me with pure hatred. My mother looked at me like I was a stranger. "So that's it?" she asked in disbelief. "That's it," I replied, already turning to leave. "You're all choosing to support a selfish demand instead of celebrating an important moment in my life. You made the choice." I walked out without looking back, my heart racing but my head held high. When I got home, my fiancé was waiting and I knew I had made the right decision, even if it cost me my relationship with my family. The following weeks were hell. I received messages from family members cutting me off from future events, treating me like I was a pariah. My sister made sure to spread the story that I had abandoned the family over a wedding date. Even some childhood friends stopped talking to me, buying into her narrative. But deep down, I knew the only people who truly mattered were standing by my side. My fiancé and I moved forward with our plans, but the emotional scar of this betrayal never fully healed. On our wedding day, my family didn't show up. The seats reserved for them remained empty, but I felt a strange peace. I looked at my wife and knew that I had made the right choice. My family might have tried to tear me down, but I had built my own family now, and nothing, neither jealousy nor manipulation, could take that away from me. After our wedding took place without my family present, I knew things would never be the same. From that moment on, I decided to cut ties. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The emotional manipulation, the lack of support, and the constant pressure made it clear that to move forward with my life alongside my wife, I needed to fully distance myself from that toxicity. Not long after, my sister managed to have her wedding. She finally found a venue available, but the event was a disaster. The catering was poorly organized, her dress ripped before the ceremony, and the atmosphere among the guests was tense. Some people even remarked that the energy of the event felt off, almost like everything had been forced. She tried to keep up appearances, but it was clear to everyone present that it wasn't the dream day she had envisioned. To make matters worse, her marriage didn't last long. Less than a year later, she and her husband separated. The constant fights, the stress of his military job, and family pressure led to everything falling apart, and as expected, I was blamed for it all. My mom, dad, uncles, they all started to say that if I had just given in and changed my wedding date, my sister wouldn't have had so many problems. They claimed that karma was coming back to me for dividing the family. The messages became frequent and there was constant pressure for me to apologize and try to reconcile, but I was resolute. My wife and I had worked too hard to build our life together, and I had no regrets about the choices I made. We knew our focus was on ourselves and we were thriving together, working as a team. As time went on, we became financially secure. We started our own business, something we had always dreamed of, and success came with a lot of hard work. Every accomplishment was a reminder that we had made the right decisions by stepping away from the negativity. The peace we found in our life together was non-negotiable, and there was no room for the demands of my old family. However, with our success came another wave of manipulation. The family that once accused me of being selfish started showing up with financial requests. At first, they were small, disguised as loans that, of course, would never be repaid. Then, the messages became more blatant. My dad would call asking for help with household bills. My sister, now divorced, sent messages saying she was struggling and that as her brother I had an obligation to help her. Even my mom, who once accused me of destroying the family, claimed I needed to make up for the damage I caused by offering financial support. They acted as if I owed them something for not giving in to their demands in the past. But I didn't cave. After everything I had been through, it was clear that these people were not interested in my well-being, only in what they could get from me. They saw me as nothing more than a resource, a solution to the problems they had created themselves. They were no longer my family. They were just people related to me by blood, and blood alone isn't enough to sustain a real relationship. My real family was my wife, the one who stood by me through every moment, every battle, and every victory. That's when I made my final decision. I blocked all their contacts, deleted the messages, and completely cut off any ties with them. There was no longer any space for these people in my life. I had built a new reality with my wife, a reality where respect, mutual support, and love were the only foundations. There was no more manipulation, no more guilt, no more pressure. I didn't owe them anything. If they couldn't respect my decision, then they didn't deserve to be a part of my life. Now, my wife and I live in peace, focused on what truly matters, ourselves. What I have with her is a true partnership, a family I chose to build and protect. The others, they are just echoes of a past I left behind, and honestly, I don't miss any of it. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I was 15 the first time I realized just how disposable I was to my own family. My name's Brian, and back then, I thought I understood what it meant to be part of a family. You grow up thinking you can trust the people around you, your mom, your dad, your siblings, that even if things weren't always perfect, blood meant something. That family had your back, especially when the world didn't. I wasn't naive, not completely, but I definitely wasn't prepared for what happened that night or what came after. At first glance, we probably looked like a normal family from the outside. Dad was this towering presence, loud, opinionated, a bit old school. He believed in tough love, though most of the time the love part felt optional. Mom was quieter, softer, the one who made sure things didn't fall apart. She was always the buffer between Dad and us kids. My older brother, Jake, was 17 and knew how to play everyone like a game of chess. And then there was me, 15, average in most ways. I didn't cause trouble. I kept to myself and I tried, really tried, to stay out of the crossfire, but that didn't stop me from becoming the perfect scapegoat. Jake and I used to be close when we were younger. I mean, we fought like any siblings, but we'd build forts in the backyard, stay up late talking about video games, even team up when our parents argued. But somewhere around the time Jake hit puberty and realized he could manipulate people, things shifted. He figured out that he could get away with nearly anything as long as he spun the right story. And Dad ate it up. Jake could lie through his teeth and still walk away with a pat on the back while I got grilled for things I didn't even do. Started small. A broken lamp here, a missing charger there. Jake would say, "Brian did it." And that was that. No questions, no chance to explain. I'd get grounded or lectured, and Jake would smirk when no one was looking. I told Mom a few times, hoping she'd see through it, but she'd just sigh and tell me to be the bigger person. "He's older, but he's still figuring things out," she'd say. "Just ignore him, Brian. It's not worth the fight." But it was. It was worth the fight. I just didn't know how to win. Things really came to a head in early October, right as the weather was starting to turn. That week had been tense. Dad was stressed about work, Jake was acting weird, and Mom had been staying late at her job. I could feel something building like a storm you can't see but just know is there. And then Friday happened. I got home from school like normal, dropped my bag, grabbed a snack, and went to my room to play some guitar. I was learning this one song I'd been obsessed with for weeks. And for once I felt calm, peaceful, like maybe the weekend would be quiet. I was halfway through the chorus when I heard Dad yelling my name from downstairs. Not just calling, yelling. The kind of tone that curdles your stomach instantly. "Brian, get down here now." I froze. I hadn't done anything. I ran through everything in my head. Did I forget to do the dishes? Was there a chore I missed? I set the guitar down gently and headed downstairs, heart thudding in my chest. Dad was standing in the living room, arms crossed, face red. Jake was sitting on the couch, staring at the floor, playing the innocent act he'd perfected over the years. There was a shattered picture frame on the coffee table. A photo of our family, now splintered across the glass like some kind of metaphor. "You think I'm stupid?" Dad snapped the second I stepped into the room. "Jake told me everything. You broke this and tried to lie about it. Then you laughed in his face when he asked you to help clean it up." My jaw dropped. "What? No, I don't. You dare lie to me?" He cut in, voice booming. "Jake saw you throw your backpack at it when you got home. Then you walked away like it was nothing." I looked at Jake, eyes wide. That's not true. I didn't even come into the living room. I went straight upstairs. Jake didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just kept staring at the floor, biting his lip like he was the victim here. I turned back to Dad, trying to stay calm. I swear I didn't do it. Of course you did, he barked. You're always careless, always looking for attention. You think this is a joke? Breaking things, lying about it? I didn't. Enough. Go to your room and don't expect to come out for the rest of the weekend. But, I said, go. I bit down on the urge to argue more. I knew from experience that nothing I said would matter. Once Dad made up his mind, that was it. I glanced at Jake one last time before turning around. His face was blank, but I caught the tiniest twitch of a smile as I walked away. That night, I sat on my bed in silence. No music, no distractions. Just me and the growing sense that something was broken. Really broken. And not just the picture frame. I kept thinking, why would Jake do that? What did he get out of it? Did he actually enjoy watching me get punished? I didn't sleep much, and the weekend only got worse. Every time I came downstairs, I was met with cold stares or clipped words. Jake strutted around like a golden child, offering to help with dinner or take out the trash like he was some kind of saint. And Dad lapped it up. I could feel myself shrinking inside my own home, like I didn't belong anymore. It wasn't until Monday morning that I found out what really happened. I was grabbing my backpack from the hallway when I heard Jake in the kitchen talking to someone on the phone. Nah, it was easy, he said, laughing softly. I just told him Brian did it. He flipped out like always. My heart stopped. I stepped closer, barely breathing. Yeah, dude, he didn't even question it. Grounded him for the whole weekend. I didn't even have to fake being upset. Worked like a charm. I stepped into the doorway. Jake jumped, phone slipping slightly from his ear. His eyes met mine, and for a second we just stared at each other. No words, no excuses. Then he smiled, shrugged. Oops, I don't know what came over me, but I just turned around and left. I didn't say anything to him, didn't yell or punch a wall or cry. I just walked out the front door and kept walking. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't care. My chest felt hollow. My throat was tight. I didn't want to be in that house for another second. It was raining, cold, and steady. The kind of rain that seeps into your clothes and chills you to the bone. I didn't bring a jacket. Didn't even grab my phone. I was 3 blocks away when I heard my name. Brian. I turned and there was Dad standing under an umbrella, face twisted in anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? I didn't answer. You think you can just storm off like some dramatic little brat? Get back to the house. No, I said, barely above a whisper. What did you say? I looked him in the eye. I'm not going back. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Then his voice dropped to a low growl. You're not welcome in this house if you're going to act like this. I didn't fight back. I just nodded, turned around, and walked. I didn't see where he went. I just kept walking. 2 weeks later, I came back. Not because I forgave anyone, but because I didn't have much choice. I'd been staying with my friend Carson's family, sleeping on a pull-out couch in their basement. His parents were kind, but I knew I couldn't stay forever. I needed clothes. I needed my school books. I needed, I don't know, closure maybe. When I stepped through the door, it was like nothing had changed. Jake was on the couch eating chips and playing video games. Dad was in the kitchen laughing with some of his coworkers from the auto shop. They were loud, cracking jokes and telling stories. And then I heard it. Yeah, kicked him out in the rain. Dad was saying, chuckling. Little punk thought he could defy me. Let him walk. Maybe that taught him something. The guys laughed. I stood frozen in the hallway, every word sinking in like a stone. And then I saw her, Mom. She was standing just behind Dad, holding a grocery bag in one hand. And the look on her face, I'll never forget it. She'd heard every word. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something change in her eyes. Something sharp, something cold. And I knew everything was about to shift. I didn't move. Couldn't. My feet were frozen to the floor as I watched Mom stare at Dad like she'd never seen him before. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there with her keys still in hand, the grocery bag starting to slip from her fingers. I remember watching an apple roll out and hit the floor. No one noticed. Not Dad, not Jake, not the coworkers still howling with laughter. But I did. And I knew something irreversible had just cracked open. Then quietly, Mom set the rest of the bag down and turned around. She walked past me without saying a word, but for a split second, our eyes met. I expected disappointment or maybe guilt, the kind of look she usually gave me when Dad was being harsh. But this time it was different. It was fire. I didn't see what happened next, at least not right away. I grabbed a hoodie from the stairs and left again. Not sure where I was going. I ended up sitting behind the corner store a few blocks away, just watching the rain hit puddles for what felt like hours. My phone was dead. I was soaked through again. But I felt still. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't anxious or hurt or confused. I was angry, not the kind of anger that burns out quick, but the kind that sinks into your bones. Slow, steady, focused. When I finally came back home later that night, something had shifted in the air. The living room was quiet. The guests were gone. Jake's game console had been unplugged, and Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea like she hadn't just watched her husband laugh about exiling his kid in the pouring rain. "Come sit," she said without looking up. I hesitated. "Is Dad?" "He's in the garage." "Don't worry." I sat. The tea in front of me was still steaming. "You didn't tell me," she said. "You didn't say what he said to you that night. I figured you already knew." "I didn't," she said quietly. "Jake told me you stormed out after breaking something and screaming at Dad." I looked down, jaw clenched. Of course he did. "But then I heard what your father said today," she added, her voice flatter now. And suddenly a lot of things made sense. We sat in silence. "I'm sorry," she said, and I flinched. Not because of the apology, but because it sounded real. Too real. Like she'd finally seen everything I'd been quietly living through. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. But that moment should have been the start of things getting better. It wasn't, because that was the moment Jake realized he was losing control, and he did not take it well. The next few weeks were a slow, suffocating spiral. Mom started questioning things more, asking Jake for his side and mine, checking in with me privately, giving me the benefit of the doubt in a way I wasn't used to. At first, it felt like I was finally being seen, but it also painted a target on my back. Jake didn't like the attention being taken off him. He was used to being the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the favorite, the future. And suddenly, Mom wasn't hanging on his every word. Suddenly, she was spending more time with me, asking about school, watching my guitar practice, making sure I had dinner before disappearing for the night. Jake noticed. He started small, petty sabotage. My phone charger would vanish from my room. My homework mysteriously went missing. One day, I found all my socks soaking wet in the bathroom sink. I didn't have proof, but I knew it was him. His smug little smirk when I came downstairs looking for my stuff told me everything. I tried to ignore it. I told myself he'd get bored eventually, but Jake wasn't wired like that. If he couldn't be adored, he'd settle for being feared. And when he couldn't control the narrative, he'd burn the whole thing down. One night, I came home from school to find Dad pacing in the living room with this wild look in his eyes. Jake was sitting on the stairs, head bowed like some sad little martyr. "Where is it?" Dad snapped the second he saw me. "Where's what?" "You know exactly what. The $200 from my top drawer," he said. "Gone." My stomach dropped. Not because I took it, but because I knew where this was going. "I didn't take anything," I said. "Why would I even?" "Jake saw you going into our room yesterday." "I was looking for Mom." "Don't lie to me." I looked at Jake, who had the gall to look hurt. "I saw him go in after school." I didn't think anything of it until I overheard him on the phone bragging about having cash for a new amp. My mouth went dry. "What? That's not." "I'm done with the lies," Dad shouted. "I should have never let you back in this house." "I didn't." "You think I'm stupid? You think I wouldn't notice when money goes missing the same day you're bragging about gear?" "I never said that. Ask Carson. Ask literally anyone. I haven't been saving for anything." I've been working at the corner store every weekend to pay for that amp. You can check with Mr. Hernandez. Yeah, Dad scoffed. We'll see what your manager says. He stormed off. I stood there trembling, not from fear, but fury. And Jake just smiled and walked past me like nothing happened. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the times I let things go, all the times I didn't push back. Every lie Jake told, every punishment I took, every time Dad believed him without question. I realized something important. They wanted me to stay quiet. They needed me to, but I wasn't going to anymore. The next day at school, I went to the guidance counselor. I told her everything, not just about the money, but about the months leading up to it. The pattern, the lies, the treatment at home. She listened. She wrote things down. She nodded a lot, but I didn't know if any of it meant anything. Still, it felt good to say it out loud. When I came home that afternoon, Dad was waiting for me with his arms crossed. Jake was already on the couch, eating chips like nothing happened. You told your school we were abusing you? Dad growled. I froze. Your counselor called. Said they're opening a case. Said someone's coming to do a home visit. Jake was smirking now. Nice one, Brian. Real mature. Dad took a step closer. You think this is a game? Bringing strangers into our house? You want to humiliate your family? Fine. But you better pray they find something, because if they don't, you're out for good. I looked at Mom, who had just walked into the room carrying laundry. Her eyes were wide. You threatened him? She asked. He's trying to ruin us, Dad barked. He wants to tear this family apart because he's too lazy to take responsibility. He's 15, she snapped. You're a grown man. You don't get to threaten your child just because he finally spoke up. That shut everyone up, but not for long. 2 days later, the social worker came. She talked to all of us separately, asked questions, took notes. I told her everything again. She was patient, but her face gave nothing away. I didn't know if she believed me. I didn't know if anything would come of it, but Jake did, and he panicked. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. Mom was yelling. Dad was roaring. Jake was crying. I came downstairs and saw it. Mom holding Jake's phone open to a group chat. There were screenshots, photos, messages, stuff Jake had been saying to his friends. Things like, watch this. I'm gonna get Brian kicked out again, and my dad believes anything I say. There were videos, too. One of him pretending to cry after breaking a plate. Another of him mocking me after I got grounded. It was all there. Everything. I stood there frozen as Jake tried to defend himself. It was just jokes. They're my friends. None of it's real. But Dad wasn't listening. Mom wasn't either. And for once, the silence wasn't mine to carry. I thought this would be the moment things finally turned around. That Jake would face consequences. That maybe, just maybe, I'd be believed without having to drag the truth into the light. But what happened next? That was worse than anything I'd imagined. Because instead of punishment, instead of an apology, instead of justice, they made me the problem again. And what they did next, that was the breaking point. It's funny how people always say the truth will set you free. Like the moment you drag it into the light, everything wrong will suddenly flip itself right. I used to believe that. For a long time, I held on to this quiet hope that if I just waited long enough, stayed patient, and kept my head down, the truth would eventually fight for me. But it didn't. Not at first. After the group chat was exposed, after Mom saw the messages and the videos and every bit of smug manipulation Jake had stashed on his phone, I expected anything to shift. There was yelling. There was crying. There were threats thrown like knives across the living room. But in the end, nothing really changed. Not in the way that mattered, because somehow I still ended up being the one blamed. Started with Dad. He didn't say a word at first, just stared at Jake. Then at me like the weight of the truth was too heavy for him to admit he'd been wrong for years. Then he shook his head and muttered something that still haunts me. You could have handled this privately. I blinked. What? You didn't have to humiliate your brother like that. You went through his phone. You think that's okay? I didn't go through anything. Mom did. And what are you even talking about? He's the one who set me up for months. lied, got me kicked out. He said it himself. He did it all on purpose. He's a kid, Dad snapped. He's still learning. You should have talked to me like a man instead of crying to your school. My heart dropped. There it was, the wall. Even with all the proof laid out in front of him, even with Jake's own words echoing through the house, Dad couldn't see past his pride. He didn't want the truth. He wanted control. And in his eyes, I had broken the chain. Mom tried to stand up for me. At first, she defended me that morning, challenged Dad in a way I'd never seen before. But it didn't last. By dinner, she was quiet again, distant. When I asked if she was okay, she just looked tired. I'm trying to keep this family together, Brian, she whispered. You don't understand how hard that is. I did, but I also knew something else. It wasn't my job to hold the pieces anymore. After that day, things got worse. Not louder, quieter, which somehow felt crueler. Jake didn't talk to me at all. Just walked past me like I didn't exist. Dad barely acknowledged me. Mom only spoke when necessary. There were no more accusations. No more screaming matches. Just silence. Cold, sharp, echoing silence. It was like I had died and no one had the decency to hold a funeral. The home visit with the social worker ended in a shrug. She said there wasn't enough evidence of abuse to intervene formally. Emotional neglect, unfortunately, was a gray area. Monitor the situation, she told my counselor. Let us know if anything escalates. So, I stopped expecting help and I stopped asking for it. I hit rock bottom about a week later. It was a Thursday. I'd stayed late after school helping the band teacher organize music stands, mostly just to avoid going home. When I finally did, the front door was locked. No note, no call, nothing. When I knocked, Jake answered. He stared at me through the glass for a moment, then slowly, deliberately, closed the door again. I stood on the porch for 20 minutes, waiting, hoping maybe Mom would come open it, that she'd say it was just a mistake, that someone had forgotten I didn't have a key. No one came. Eventually, I left again. I went back to Carson's place, soaked through and silent. His mom opened the door before I could knock. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "Come in." They never asked for an explanation. Just let me shower, gave me dry clothes, made me dinner. Carson and I stayed up that night playing old video games and pretending everything was normal. But I couldn't pretend anymore. That night, I stared at the ceiling in their basement and made a decision. I wasn't going back. Not this time. The next morning, I went to the school office and asked for a meeting with the guidance counselor. I told her everything again, but this time I asked for options. Legal options, housing, emancipation, anything. "I'm tired," I said, "and I'm not safe there." "Not really." She looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. It didn't happen overnight, but things did start happening. The school connected me with a youth outreach program. They arranged a meeting with a social worker who specialized in at-risk teens. We met weekly. She listened. She actually listened. For the first time in my life, someone treated my story like it mattered. She helped me apply for a student housing program for minors in unstable home environments. It wasn't easy. There were interviews, paperwork, home checks. But Carson's parents vouched for me. So did the band teacher. So did Mr. Hernandez from the corner store. People showed up for me in ways I never expected. Eventually, I got placed in a group home 2 towns over. It wasn't glamorous. 3 kids to a room, shared bathrooms, chores every day, but it was safe. And for the first time in months, I could breathe. I started rebuilding one piece at a time. I got a part-time job at a music shop near the group home. The manager, a grizzled guy named Keith, liked that I could tune guitars by ear. He let me help with repairs, paid cash under the table until the paperwork caught up. I saved every penny. I enrolled in therapy through the youth program. I didn't want to at first. I'd always hated talking about feelings, but the therapist, Carla, had this way of making you feel like you weren't broken, just rearranged. I told her everything. The lies, the favoritism, the way I'd vanished from my own family, and she didn't try to fix me. She just let me be. At school, things slowly improved. Word got around about what happened, but not in a cruel way. A few kids started sitting with me at lunch. One of the seniors in band invited me to join his garage group. I said yes. We started practicing after school, jamming in his dad's shed. I hadn't realized how much I missed feeling part of something. I also started doing better in class. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because the chaos was gone, or maybe because for the first time I was doing it for me. I even won a small scholarship for a song I wrote and submitted anonymously to a statewide music competition. It was a simple piece, just me and my guitar. But the lyrics were raw, honest. The judges called it haunting. I didn't tell anyone it was about Jake or Dad or standing in the rain at 15 waiting for a door that would never open. The fall was slow and it hurt. But the rise was mine. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized something important. You don't need a family that breaks you to feel whole again. You just need to stop waiting for them to heal you. I was rebuilding now, brick by brick, step by step. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because as much as I wanted to move forward, there was still a part of me deep down that needed something else. Closure. Not the kind you get from forgiveness, but the kind you take back with your own hands. And when that opportunity came, I didn't hesitate. It's strange the way anger can settle into you like embers after a wildfire. Quiet, almost invisible, but always warm, always burning. For months, I'd buried the worst of it beneath the small victories. My job at the music shop, band practice, the scholarship. Everyone said I was doing great. The school counselor told me I was resilient. Carla said I was healing, and in some ways I was. But there was still a part of me, this stubborn, pulsing ache that hadn't moved on, that remembered the cold rain soaking my hoodie, Jake's smirk through the glass, my father's voice like a door slamming shut. You're not welcome in this house. That line played on a loop some nights as I lay in bed at the group home staring at the ceiling. I wasn't obsessed with revenge. Not exactly. I didn't want violence or some dramatic courtroom scene where I stood up and pointed at them like I was in a movie. No, what I wanted was something much simpler. I wanted the truth to matter. I wanted them to feel what I felt, and I wanted control. That's where it started. The idea came slowly, like a guitar riff I couldn't quite get out of my head. At first, it was just a thought, then a plan, then a project. And the first piece of that project, information. People forget that teenagers are always watching, listening, taking notes. And I'd spent my whole life doing just that. I knew my dad. I knew how he thought, how he lied, how he boasted, how he never checked the small things because he was too busy puffing up the big ones. I knew how much he cared about appearances, about respect, about being the guy everyone looked up to in his circle. I also knew that Jake was slipping, that the golden child mask was cracking now that I wasn't around to take the heat. I still had mutual friends at the school, people who told me things without knowing they were helping me. Stories about Jake skipping class, getting into fights, mouthing off to teachers. One kid said Jake had started bragging about being able to hack grades and change attendance in the school system. That caught my attention, so I started asking around, slowly, carefully. It turned out Jake had found a way into the school system, but not through hacking exactly. One of his friends had an older brother who worked in IT for the district. They'd figured out a back door into the school portal using a shared admin account and a password someone had stupidly left on a sticky note in the lab. Jake had been using it for months, not just to fix grades, but to delete absences, submit fake assignments. He even added an extracurricular activity to his transcript that didn't exist, and no one noticed. That was the beauty of favoritism. Everyone gave him the benefit of the doubt. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet, because I wasn't ready to move. Not until the next piece fell into place, which it did about 2 weeks later. I was working at the music shop when Keith, the owner, pulled me aside and handed me a thick envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Your competition prize," he said. "They sent it here since you listed the shop as your primary mailing address." Smart, by the way. I opened it. Inside was a check, $2,000. More than I expected. Enough for a new guitar. Maybe even enough for my own second-hand laptop. But I didn't spend it. Not yet. Because now I had the means and the motive and just one more thing to do. I reached out to Carson that night. We hadn't talked much lately, just drifted like people do. But he was still the only person who'd seen what happened to me in real time. He didn't hesitate when I asked to meet up. We got burgers and sat in his driveway like we were 13 again, talking about nothing for a while before I eased into it. "I need a favor," I said. Carson raised an eyebrow. "What kind of favor?" "Nothing illegal. Just quiet." He nodded slowly. "I'm listening." I told him about Jake, the system, the fake grades, the admin login. Carson's eyes widened. "Dude, that's a felony. Only if I expose him wrong," I said. "I don't want to get anyone arrested. I want the school to know. I want my parents to know. I want it all to crash down. Not because I shouted it from the rooftops, but because he did it to himself." Carson grinned. "Okay, I'm in. But how?" That's when I told him the rest of the plan. We'd gather proof, not just screenshots, but video, audio, something that would be impossible to deny. Something I could drop like a hammer at just the right moment. And the right moment? That would be Family Honors Night. It happened every spring. A stupid ceremony the school hosted for students and parents to celebrate academic excellence and moral character. Jake was set to receive 3 fake awards. One for academic performance, one for extracurricular leadership, and one for peer mentorship, whatever that meant. My parents were planning to attend, of course. It was their favorite thing, parading Jake around like a trophy. I wanted that night, but I couldn't just show up with accusations. I needed to build it like a story. So we started gathering. Carson pretended to be interested in Jake's methods. Said he wanted help fixing his own grades. He got Jake talking, got him bragging, got him explaining the whole process again, this time on video with his phone recording in his jacket pocket. We got everything. The login details, the fake activities, even a screenshot of Jake adding a volunteer trip to his record that never happened. Meanwhile, I contacted the competition board from the music scholarship. Told them I wanted to donate a portion of my prize anonymously to fund future entries for kids in group homes. They loved the idea. They asked me to attend honors night to receive a special certificate in front of the crowd. Perfect. Now I had a reason to be there. The day of the event, I wore a borrowed blazer and stood off to the side while Jake and my parents smoozed with the staff. My mom spotted me first. Her face shifted. Shock, then hesitation, then something almost like guilt. "Brian," she said, "I didn't know you were coming." "I was invited," I said simply. "Scholarship award." Jake turned around mid-laugh and went pale when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" I smiled. "Oh, just here to support family. Isn't that what this night's about?" Dad didn't say much, just gave me a once-over and grunted. Typical. The ceremony started. Names were called. Applause echoed. I got my certificate and stepped off stage with a tight smile. Then it was Jake's turn. They listed off his accomplishments. Grades, clubs, mentoring, and as the applause rang out, Carson slipped into the back row where I stood. He handed me a USB drive. I nodded. Showtime. I approached the principal after the ceremony just as she was congratulating my parents. I was polite, smiled, said there was something I needed to show her, something important about the school's online system. She looked confused, then concerned. I handed her the drive. "Everything's on there," I said. "You'll want to look through it carefully." She asked questions. I didn't answer them. Not then. I told her to email me if she needed clarification. Then I left. 2 days later, I got the message. A formal request for a statement. Jake was under investigation for academic dishonesty. But that wasn't the best part. No, the best part came later when everything I'd been building finally snapped into place. When they found out and the fallout, it was more than I ever expected. When the principal emailed me asking for a formal statement, I knew the dominoes had finally started to fall. It wasn't instant. Nothing in real life ever is. But the moment I agreed to meet with her and 2 district administrators the following day, I could practically feel the balance of power shift. They welcomed me into a small conference room with a pitcher of water on the table and a notepad set in front of each chair. It was quiet, professional, and serious in a way that made my palms sweat. Even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. They played the videos. They asked thoughtful, careful questions. They looked through the screenshots. They even recognized the compromised admin credentials Jake had been using. Apparently, A password reset had gone unnoticed months ago. When they were done, one of the district administrators exhaled slowly and set the last printed screenshot down like it weighed 100 pounds. "Thank you, Brian," she said. "This is a very significant breach. And the fact that a student has been using administrator access to alter academic records is extraordinarily serious." I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just nodded. "When will you tell him?" I asked. "We'll notify him and his parents today," the principal said. "And his teachers and possibly the board, depending on what else we find." "What about the other students?" I asked. "The ones he helped change grades for?" "That depends on the extent of the manipulation," she said. "We have to audit everything." "But Brian, you did the right thing." The right thing. People toss those words around so lightly. But hearing them from someone outside my family, someone who had no reason to lie, no ulterior motive, hit me harder than I expected. I left the meeting knowing the fuse had been lit, and all I had to do now was sit back and watch. The explosion came 3 days later. I was at the music shop restringing a customer's guitar behind the counter when my phone rang. It was Mom. Not a text, not a voicemail, a call. I hesitated but picked up. "Hello, Brian." Her voice was thin, strained. "Can you come home, please? We need to talk." I didn't say yes or no. I just said I'd think about it and hung up. 10 minutes later, Carson burst through the shop door, breathless, like he'd sprinted across town. "Dude, you need to hear this." He told me the whole thing. How Jake had been pulled from class. How Dad showed up at the school raging. How the principal had laid everything out. Every altered grade, every forged entry, every fake hour of volunteer work. How Jake tried to lie, then cried, then lied again, then blamed me, then blamed the IT kid, then said someone hacked his phone. But this time, none of it worked. They had recordings, screenshots, dates, IP logs, everything was airtight. Jake was suspended pending a full board review. His college prospects gone. His peer mentor award revoked. His reputation ruined. My father, Carson described him, pacing the hallway like a caged animal, yelling about conspiracies and vendettas until a district officer told him to step outside or be escorted out. My mother? She cried, but not out of anger. Out of something heavier, something that sounded from Carson's reenactment dangerously close to regret. Later that evening, after my shift, I decided to go. Not for them, for me. I needed to see the fallout with my own eyes. Not out of spite, but to close the chapter fully. To let my younger self, the one dripping with rain, shunned and ignored, finally witness justice without being silenced. When I arrived, the house was chaotic. The living room was a mess. Papers everywhere. A crumpled letter from the school board sat on the coffee table. Dad was in his chair with his head in his hands, breathing hard. Jake sat on the couch, face blotchy and red, eyes swollen. He wasn't crying anymore. He was empty, hollow, like someone had pulled all the swagger and arrogance out of him and left nothing but a scared kid. Mom saw me first. "Brian," she whispered, "thank you for coming." Dad looked up at me with a mix of anger and something he wasn't used to feeling. Uncertainty. Jake didn't look up at all. I closed the door behind me and stepped into the room like I wasn't the same 15-year-old they once threw out into the rain. Mom took a shaky breath. "We know everything. The school showed us the evidence. They said you provided it." Dad snapped. "So, you've been plotting this for months?" I didn't react. "No, I've been living my life. He's the one who forged grades, made up activities, manipulated a school system, and bragged about it to his friends." Dad stood. "You wanted to ruin your brother." "No," I said calmly. "He ruined himself. I just stopped covering the damage." Jake finally looked up then, eyes red, jaw trembling. "You set me up," he whispered. "No, you set me up for years," I replied. "All I did was tell the truth to people who actually listened." The room was so silent I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Mom wiped her face. "Brian, why didn't you come to us? Why didn't you give us a chance to fix this?" I laughed quietly, not out of humor, but disbelief. "I tried for years. I told you about the small things, the lies, the favoritism. You always told me to be the bigger person. You always told me not to cause trouble. And then you watched Dad kick me out in the rain because of something he made up. And when the school stepped in, you both treated me like a problem instead of a son. Mom flinched. Dad clenched his fists. Jake looked like he wanted to disappear. I continued, voice steady, controlled, almost gentle. I didn't come here to fight. I didn't come here to watch you unravel either. I came because I needed you to hear this once, clearly, and without interruption. I took a breath. I'm done. Dad scoffed. What does that even mean? It means I said you don't get to have power over me anymore. I'm building my own life. I have a job, a place to live, people who support me. I'm not here to fix anything. I'm here to close the door you slammed on me when I was 15. Mom stepped forward. So that's it? We lose you. You lost me the night I begged to come inside and no one opened the door. I said. Tonight isn't about loss. It's about understanding. Jake finally spoke again, voice small. Brian, I'm sorry. I studied him. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he didn't. But it didn't matter because I wasn't the kid who needed his apology anymore. I hope, I said quietly, you learned something from all this. Not because you got caught, but because you finally felt what it's like to face the consequences you've been handing me for years. He looked away. Mom was crying again. Dad was silent with anger or shame or both. It didn't matter. I stepped toward the door. Mom whispered, Will we ever see you again? Maybe, I said honestly. But not like this. Not with me begging for space or fairness. If you want to be part of my life someday, you'll have to walk toward me. I'm done walking alone. And with that, I left. No dramatic slam. No final scream. Just a quiet click of the door behind me as I stepped into the cool night air. The group home was waiting. My guitar was waiting. My future, one I'd built with my own hands, was waiting. And for the first time, the weight on my chest was gone. Completely gone. As I walked down the street past the house I no longer feared, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't about destroying someone else's life. It was about reclaiming your own. And I had finally done it. I never looked back. Because sometimes the loudest victory is simply walking away and living a life they never believed you. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I never expected to see my cousin Emily again. At least not like this. The last time we spoke was almost a decade ago when I was struggling to make ends meet while she was flaunting her latest shopping spree. She always had a way of making me feel small, like I didn't belong in the same family. But life has a funny way of flipping the script. My name is Jake and I'm 32 years old. 10 years ago, I was barely scraping by, working double shifts at a dingy motel while dreaming of something bigger. Meanwhile, my extended family treated me like a failure, especially Emily. She was the golden child, showered with praise for doing the bare minimum while I was mocked for every setback. My parents had passed away when I was in my early 20s, leaving me with no real safety net, while Emily's parents lavished her with expensive gifts, vacations, and anything else she desired. I had no handouts, no shortcuts, just pure grit. I saved every penny, worked ridiculous hours, and learned everything I could about the hospitality industry. Slowly but surely, I climbed my way up, taking risks when I could, investing in myself, and eventually, against all odds, I managed to buy my own small but elegant hotel. It wasn't a 5-star resort, but it was mine. I built it from the ground up, turning it into a respected venue for weddings, parties, and high-end events. Emily, of course, had no idea. As far as she knew, I had faded into irrelevance, just another distant relative she didn't need to think about. That is until the night of her extravagant birthday party hosted at my hotel. It was a busy evening. My staff was handling everything smoothly, and I was overseeing the final details when I noticed a familiar name on the event list. Emily. My stomach twisted. I hadn't seen her in years, and part of me wondered if she had changed. Maybe she had outgrown her entitled ways. Maybe time had softened her arrogance. Then I saw her walk through the grand entrance, and I knew nothing had changed. Emily strutted in like she owned the place, draped in designer everything, her voice carrying over the soft music as she barked orders at the staff. She barely acknowledged anyone she considered beneath her. My employees shot me nervous glances as she snapped at them for minor inconveniences. I had planned to keep a low profile to just observe, but fate had other plans. I was standing near the bar when Emily spotted me. At first, she did a double take, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. Then, as recognition dawned, her expression shifted into something cruel. "What is he doing here?" she scoffed, loud enough for half the room to hear. One of my employees hesitated before responding. But Emily cut them off. "I don't care. Get him out now." The room fell silent. I felt the stares, the whispers. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to stay calm. A security guard, clearly uncomfortable, approached me hesitantly. "Sir, she's asking." I held up a hand. "I know what she's asking." I turned back to Emily, who was watching with a smirk, waiting for me to be escorted out like some lowly intruder at her party. "Emily," I said, keeping my voice steady, "do you even know where you are?" She rolled her eyes. "Obviously, this is the Sterling Hotel, the nicest place in town. Unlike you, I have taste." I smiled. "And do you know who owns the Sterling Hotel?" Emily scoffed again, waving a dismissive hand. "Some rich businessman, obviously. Why would I care?" I didn't have to say anything. One of my employees standing nearby cleared their throat and, with an almost gleeful look, said, Actually he does." Emily froze. "What?" I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward her. Displayed clearly was the official hotel website with my name listed as the owner. Her face drained of color. The smirk vanished. The room was silent, all eyes on her as realization sank in. I leaned in just slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Now, do you still want security to throw me out?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. And that's when I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her. I let the silence stretch, savoring the moment. Emily's mouth hung open, her confidence evaporating in real time. Just minutes ago, she had been basking in the glow of her own importance, barking orders at my staff and demanding I be thrown out. Now she looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Wait," she stammered, shaking her head as if trying to reset reality. "You're joking, right? There's no way you own this place." I chuckled, shaking my head. "I get it. Must be hard to believe that the cousin you used to mock for being a failure now owns the venue you just spent thousands to rent out." I folded my arms, tilting my head. "But here we are." Emily glanced around as if hoping anyone, would tell her this was some elaborate prank. The guests were whispering now, exchanging amused glances, and my staff stood by, waiting for my next move. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough for her to hear. "Now, what was it you told security a minute ago?" "Oh right. Throw that nobody out." I let out an exaggerated sigh. "You know, Emily, I think you're right. We should remove people who don't belong here." Her eyes widened in horror. "Wait, no." I turned to the security guard who had been watching the whole scene unfold. "I think she's causing a disturbance. Maybe she shouldn't be here after all." The security guard hesitated, looking between us. He knew I was the owner. He knew I wasn't serious. But Emily, she didn't. Emily's face crumbled. "Jake, please," she said, her voice suddenly much softer, almost pleading. "Don't do this." I arched an eyebrow. "Not tonight? Why not? You were happy to throw me out in front of all these people." I didn't even hesitate. "That was a mistake," she rushed to say, her voice cracking. I didn't know it was you." I feigned a thoughtful expression. "Oh, I see. So, if I was just some random nobody, it would have been fine to humiliate me." I let the words sink in before shaking my head. "Wow, Emily, that's a great look for you." Emily swallowed hard, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "Look, save it." I cut in, waving a hand dismissively. "You spent your whole life treating me like trash. And now that the tables have turned, suddenly you're acting all nice." I let out a mocking laugh. You must really think I'm stupid. Emily's face was bright red now. Whether from anger or embarrassment, I wasn't sure. Maybe both. She glanced at her parents, my aunt and uncle, who had been standing awkwardly nearby, unsure whether to intervene, but they knew better than to push me now. Jake, please. Emily tried again, this time in a hushed whisper. This is my birthday. Don't ruin it. I gave her a long, considering look. I'm ruining it? Kind of like how you tried to ruin mine just now. She winced. I was wrong. Okay, I admit it. Just please don't make me leave. I tapped my chin, pretending to think it over. Then I smirked. Fine, you can stay. Her shoulders sagged in relief. But I added, my smirk widening. Only if you admit right here in front of everyone that you were the one who didn't belong here tonight. Emily stiffened. What? You heard me. I crossed my arms. Say it. I was wrong and I didn't belong here tonight. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the stares, the hushed murmurs of the guests who had witnessed the whole thing. Her pride was battling her survival instinct. I could see the war raging inside her. I leaned in just a little. Or, I could just have security escort you out. Your choice. Emily swallowed hard. Her hands trembled slightly as she exhaled, then muttered under her breath. I was wrong and I didn't belong here tonight. Louder, I said, enjoying this way too much. She clenched her jaw, then forced the words out, just loud enough for the room to hear. I was wrong, and I didn't belong here tonight. I let the words hang in the air for a moment, savoring the taste of long overdue justice. The room was dead silent, all eyes on Emily as she stood there, humiliated and furious, her face a deep shade of red. I could tell she thought this was over, that she had swallowed her pride just enough to keep her precious party intact. But she was wrong. I let out a low chuckle, shaking my head. Wow, that was actually painful to watch. I sighed dramatically. But you know what? I changed my mind. Emily's head snapped up. What? I turned to the security guard. Get her out of my hotel. For a moment, Emily just stood there blinking like she hadn't actually processed what I said. Then she let out a short, nervous laugh. You're joking. I smiled. Nope. The murmurs in the room grew louder, some guests outright gasping. A few even chuckled. My aunt and uncle looked like they wanted to step in, but they knew they had no power here. Emily's eyes darted around, her panic setting in. Jake, she hissed, lowering her voice. I already apologized. You got your little moment. Just let me stay. I tilted my head. Oh, you think that was enough? You think a forced little sentence is going to erase years of you treating me like dirt? I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. Let me make something very clear, Emily. You don't get to talk your way out of this. You wanted me gone from this party. Well, guess what? Now it's your turn. She took a shaky step back, her confidence fully shattered. Please, she whispered, don't do this. This party is over for you. I motioned to the security guard. Escort her out now. The guard stepped forward, towering over her. Ma'am, I need you to come with me. Emily looked around, desperate for someone, anyone to step in. Mom, Dad. My aunt opened her mouth, but my uncle put a hand on her arm. He wasn't stupid. He knew pushing me further would only make things worse. Emily turned back to me, her voice breaking. Jake, please. Save it. I cut her off. I've spent my whole life listening to you talk down to me. I'm done listening. The security guard took her arm. Not roughly, but firmly. Let's go. Emily let out a choked sound, half outrage, half despair. You can't do this. This is my birthday. I smirked. And this is my hotel. With that, the guard led her toward the exit. She fought every step, turning back one last time. You'll regret this, Jake. I swear you'll regret this. I just smiled. Goodbye, Emily. The door slammed shut behind her, and a wave of quiet settled over the room. It was a strange kind of silence, one of disbelief but also one of relief. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the family's punching bag. As the minutes ticked by, people began murmuring amongst themselves, but no one knew quite what to say. Some of the guests looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to leave or stay given the abrupt disruption. A few had been friendly with Emily and seemed genuinely shocked by what had just happened, while others seemed to get the sense that things had shifted permanently. But then, one by one, Emily's friends started filtering out of the hotel, no doubt following her lead. They were quick to gather their things and murmur amongst themselves, throwing accusatory glances my way as they filed out. I wasn't surprised. Emily had a way of rallying people to her side, even when she was in the wrong. Once the last of her entourage left, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Aunt Marie, who had been standing in the corner the whole time, finally spoke up, her voice quiet but filled with an edge of concern. "Jake, are you sure about this? Emily, she's your cousin. It's going to tear the family apart." I gave her a look, a mix of exasperation and calm. "She's the one who tore it apart, Aunt Marie, not me." She opened her mouth as if to argue, but then she closed it, realizing there was no changing my mind. I'm not sure I've ever seen you this," she trailed off, not knowing exactly how to finish the sentence. "Angry?" I asked, leaning back against the bar. "Yeah, well, there's a first time for everything." Marie nodded slowly, clearly still processing the chaos. "Just be careful, okay?" "Don't worry, Aunt Marie. I'm done being the nice guy." And that was the truth of it. Emily had pushed me to my breaking point, and I wasn't about to back down now. That night, I went back to my office at the hotel to catch up on some emails and clear my head. I figured that would be the end of it, that Emily would sulk, maybe complain to a few people, but that would be the extent of her revenge. But I couldn't have been more wrong. It was around midnight when I heard the buzz of my phone vibrating on my desk. At first, I thought it was just another email, but when I looked, I saw a flood of notifications from Instagram and Twitter. Confused, I tapped the screen to see what was going on. It didn't take long to figure it out. Emily had posted a series of rants, both on her Instagram story and Twitter, that painted me as the villain of the night. She'd made sure to include a lot of dramatic photos, like her standing by the exit with her arms crossed and a shot of her with tear-streaked makeup. She'd captioned it, "Jake kicked me out of my own birthday party at his hotel because I called him a loser in front of all my friends. Can you believe this? Family, huh?" Laughing emoji. I scrolled through the messages and saw a pattern. Her friends were rallying behind her, leaving comments like, "So petty, Jake's a joke," and "He's clearly jealous you're successful. That's so messed up." Some of them even tagged the hotel's account, demanding that I be fired for ruining the event. My heart sank a little. Seeing the anger and support from people who had no idea of the full story stung. Emily was a master at manipulation. She'd been playing the victim for years, and now she was spinning this into some twisted narrative where she was the wrong party. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I took a deep breath and shut my phone down for a while, needing some space. It wasn't like I hadn't seen this coming. Emily had always had a knack for turning situations around to her advantage. But this felt like a whole new level of betrayal. Still, I wasn't worried. I knew the truth. And I also knew something Emily didn't. This wasn't over. The next day, things got worse. I went to check my social media, figuring the whole thing would blow over by then, but it had only escalated. Emily's posts had gone viral among her friend group, and now people from the extended family, who hadn't even been at the party, were chiming in, accusing me of ruining family traditions and of humiliating my own cousin for no reason. Some of them sent me private messages, most of them in a more judgmental tone than I expected. One message from Aunt Linda read, "Jake, I can't believe you would stoop so low. Emily is family, and no matter how much she gets on your nerves, you don't treat family like that. I'm so disappointed in you. Everyone's talking about it. You need to fix this." I stared at the message for a long moment, the anger rising again. How had it come to this? How had I become the villain in all of this? Emily had humiliated me for years. It wasn't just the party. It was everything that had come before. The way she'd belittled me, the way she'd ignored my accomplishments, and the way she'd treated my efforts like they were nothing. But in this moment, I knew the only way to put an end to it was to expose her. That night, I posted something of my own. I took screenshots of Emily's posts and put together a message. To everyone who thinks they know what happened last night, here's the truth. Emily has spent years making me the scapegoat for everything that went wrong in her life. She's publicly humiliated me for fun. And when I finally stood up for myself, this is the result. I'm not sorry for what happened. I've spent too long being the quiet one. The one who always takes the back seat in the family. It's time for that to stop. If you don't like it, well, tough luck. I'm done being her punching bag. I posted it and sat back, waiting. I didn't have to wait long for the storm to hit. At first, it was just a trickle, small comments here and there, some likes, some shares. Then the real waves began. Emily's side of the family and friends flooded my notifications, some agreeing with me, but most calling me every name under the sun. My phone buzzed incessantly as more and more people from the family piled on. I could see it now, the full scope of what was happening. Emily had spun her narrative so well that even my own relatives, some whom I had considered close, were on her side. One message from my Uncle Roger hit particularly hard. I can't believe you would air our dirty laundry like this. Emily is just trying to make sense of everything and you're out here trying to ruin her reputation. She's family, Jake, and family supports each other. You're a disgrace. That one stung. I had always looked up to Uncle Roger. To hear him turn on me like this without even trying to understand my side left a sour taste in my mouth. It felt like no matter how hard I tried to make things right, it wasn't going to matter. But as the night wore on, I kept seeing something interesting. As I scrolled through the comments, I started noticing that Emily's story didn't quite hold up for everyone. Why didn't Emily apologize if she was in the wrong? One comment asked. Another said, why does Emily always play the victim in every situation? Does she really think we don't see through it? Those comments were like a small crack in the dam. People were starting to see her for what she really was. Someone who could manipulate a situation to her benefit without any regard for who she stepped on. Then came the first big shift. My cousin Megan, who had been Emily's best friend since childhood, publicly commented on my post. I held my breath, wondering what she'd say. Megan had always been a little more level-headed than the rest of them. Her comment was simple, but it hit like a ton of bricks. Jake didn't deserve what happened. I don't care what anyone says. I've seen this happen too many times. Emily has always been like this, and it's time people knew. It was like a spark had lit a fire. Megan's post started getting shared, and soon more and more family members and friends began posting their own stories. Some people shared how Emily had manipulated them in the past, how she'd stolen attention from other people's milestones, and how she'd put others down to make herself look better. At that point, I knew there was no going back for Emily. The truth was out. The next day, the fallout continued. My phone had been blowing up nonstop. But this time, it wasn't just angry messages. Some of my friends had seen the posts and shared them with me, sending screenshots of how Emily's reputation was quickly crumbling. This is some drama I can't miss. One text read from my college buddy Mark. You're trending, man. My heart pounded as I watched the narrative shift. The more Emily tried to control the story, the more her lies unraveled. People started questioning her, and in doing so, they realized that they had been manipulated all along. The turning point came when Emily's own mother, Aunt Linda, sent me a message. She'd been one of the biggest supporters of Emily's side throughout this, but now she was apologizing. Jake, I'm so sorry. I didn't see what was happening until I saw everything unfold. I didn't want to believe it, but you're right. Emily has a habit of turning everything on others. I was wrong to defend her without knowing the whole story. Please, can we talk? I stared at the message, my mind racing. For the first time in years, Aunt Linda was admitting that Emily had manipulated her, too. That was a huge step, but I wasn't ready to talk to her just yet. Not after everything that had happened. I'd spent so long watching Emily walk all over me while the rest of the family either ignored it or stood by. I wasn't going to let them off that easy. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The fallout from the party and my post continued to ripple through our family. Emily tried to backtrack, claiming I was attacking her and ruining her life with lies. But by now, her own posts were turning against her. The pictures she'd shared of herself looking like the victim no longer had the effect she wanted. Instead, people were commenting on her constant need for attention, her refusal to take accountability, and her inability to respect boundaries. Finally, Emily called me. It was late in the evening and I had been sitting at my desk scrolling through all the messages, trying to process everything. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I picked up, but it wasn't the desperate, shaky voice of my cousin on the other end. "Jake," she began, and I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "I didn't mean for all this to happen. Please just let me fix this. I'll do anything." I leaned back in my chair, my fingers gripping the armrest as I fought to keep my composure. "Fix it? After everything you've done? After what you put me through?" She stammered, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't think it would go this far. I was just mad and I didn't know what else to do. Please don't do this. Don't ruin my life." I paused. I could feel a wave of emotion rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You've been ruining my life for years, Emily. You've treated me like dirt for far too long. Maybe if you'd stopped for a second and actually listened to me, this wouldn't have happened." She was silent for a long time, and when she spoke again, it wasn't with the same confidence she'd had before. I just wanted everyone to see me the way I saw myself. I didn't want to be the only one left behind. I don't know how to fix this." The silence hung in the air, and I knew in that moment that Emily would never truly understand the depth of what she'd done. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. "I don't want to talk to you right now. I need time, and maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that you can't keep acting like this and getting away with it." I hung up the phone, and in that moment, I finally felt the weight of everything lift just a little bit. The next few weeks were filled with awkward family gatherings and tense conversations. But the one thing that was clear was that Emily's grip on the family was weakening. More and more people began to see her for who she really was. And it wasn't pretty. It wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for everyone who had been too afraid to speak up. And while I wasn't sure what the future held for me and Emily, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't be letting her back into my life until she could truly change. For now, I was going to savor the silence, the quiet that had come after the storm. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning. It was about finally standing up for myself for the first time in a long time. And that was enough. Now on to the next story. Story 6. They skipped my wedding for a cruise. I found out from Facebook. My sister toasted to real family, just us. I didn't comment. I just cut them off from the joint trust account and prepared a surprise for later. 1 week later, my dad banged on my door, red-faced and panicked. I opened it, handed him a copy of the papers, and said, "This is your new beginning without me." The next day, Dad got his lawyer involved. They didn't come to my wedding. Not my mom, not my dad, not my sister, not a single one of them even texted the morning of. You'd think I'd done something to deserve it, hurt them, cut them out, or picked a fight. But I didn't. I'd spent months trying to make the day feel like a real family celebration. I wanted them there. I expected them there. Caroline and I had planned everything carefully. We kept it intimate. 60 guests, just enough for it to feel warm without turning into a show. She had her entire family fly in from California. Her uncle, who hadn't flown more than once a decade, showed up in a wrinkled suit and cried halfway through the ceremony. Her dad gave the kind of toast you remember your whole life. I kept looking at the door until the moment I said, "I do," hoping for a last-minute miracle, some dramatic entrance. My mom running in with her hair still pinned up, apologizing, hugging me like the movies. It didn't happen. I got through the ceremony by focusing on Caroline's smile, trying to convince myself that maybe something serious had come up. Maybe there had been an emergency, but there hadn't been. For days after the wedding, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw it. My sister posted a boomerang video clinking glasses with my parents on the deck of a cruise ship. All three of them sun-kissed and grinning like they hadn't just missed the most important moment of my life. The caption said, "To real family. Just us. Just us." I stared at those words longer than I want to admit. There were likes from their friends, comments with laughing emojis. My dad had posted a few photos, too. My mom had tagged some tropical location. None of them had said a single word to me. Not even a message. Just a lazy little thumbs up on the wedding photo I'd posted. A like. I didn't tell Caroline. I didn't even mention it out loud. I just stood up, walked into my home office, logged into the joint trust account, the one I had left open for them out of habit or maybe guilt, and cut them off completely. Access revoked. No warning, no explanation. I wasn't angry in the explosive, yelling kind of way. It was quieter, deeper. It was betrayal, and I felt it in my stomach. All those years I spent helping them with bills, covering emergencies, managing the business so they wouldn't have to work late. And this is how they showed up for me. They didn't. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 1 week later, I heard pounding on my front door. Not knocking, pounding like someone was ready to break it down. I checked the camera. My dad, face red, collar stretched like he'd yanked on it too hard, sweat down his forehead. I opened the door just enough to hand him the folder I prepared days earlier. He looked confused, like he expected a hug or an argument, but not papers. "You're out," I said. "This is your new beginning without me." I shut the door. Inside that envelope were documents that officially removed him from the business. The last piece of shared ownership he had. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this for over a year. Every contract we signed, every filing, every adjustment, I'd been slowly untangling our partnership, moving everything into my name. He just hadn't noticed because he never bothered to check the fine print. The next morning I saw them again. My dad. And this time a man in a gray suit. Lawyer. No introduction, just a clipboard and a smirk. That's when the real fight began. He came back less than 24 hours after I handed him the envelope. Not alone this time. The guy with him had the kind of face that looked permanently bored. Lawyer, black folder, pressed shirt, zero personality. He walked straight up to my porch without saying a word, flipped it open, and started reading. Mr. Hudson is seeking restitution in the form of a 40% share of accumulated business revenue from fiscal years 2022 to present, citing verbal agreements and initial financial support. He said as if we were in a courtroom already. My dad just stood there, arms crossed like he'd won something, like this was a checkmate move. I could barely look at him without feeling like something inside me was rotting. "You think you built this?" I asked him finally. He opened his mouth, ready to launch into some recycled story he's told people a dozen times. How he gave me my start. How he believed in me when no one else did. How it was our company. He gave me 10 grand when I was 25. That's true, and he helped me land my first real contract. His friend's construction company needed a website and I stayed up 3 nights building it. But that was it. After that, I was the one grinding out 14-hour days, juggling 3 freelance jobs, figuring out taxes, branding, invoices. He stopped contributing after year 1, except when he wanted to brag about his company at barbecues. I never made him prove anything because I was raised to believe that when you're family, you don't keep score. But apparently he did. The lawyer kept talking, going on about verbal contracts, historical contributions, and some vague nonsense about legacy equity. I waited until he finished his script. Then I handed him a manila folder thicker than the one I gave my dad with everything. Transaction records, ownership transfers, meeting logs, every single decision I made in the past 3 years. I'd spent over a year making sure I was legally fireproof. "You can go ahead and try," I said. "But this business, it's mine." The lawyer flipped through the first few pages, frowned, and looked at my dad like he hadn't been told the full story. My dad didn't say anything. He didn't move, just kept his arms crossed, breathing like a furnace. They left without another word. That night, someone slashed the tires on my truck. I didn't need security footage to know it was him. It wasn't even subtle. The cuts were deep, deliberate, both rear tires. No note, no message, just a quiet threat. I replaced them without saying a word to anyone. The next night, someone dumped paint on the steps of the office. A full can, bright blue, dripping down like it was supposed to make a point. Then came the fake negative reviews on Google, all saying the same thing. Fraud, unprofessional, shady business practices, made-up names, all posted within hours of each other. And 2 days later, my office sign was gone. Not stolen, just shattered with splinters all over the sidewalk. Letters kicked in. Whoever did it didn't want to take anything. They wanted to humiliate me. I knew who it was, but I didn't call the cops. Not yet. That wasn't the kind of war I wanted to fight. Instead, I made a phone call. 9 months ago, when my sister got into that out-of-state university, my dad had called me in the middle of the night. Said she couldn't afford it. Said it would break the family if she had to drop out. I covered the tuition. Quietly, $15,000 so far, paid directly to the school through a standing arrangement. I called the university finance office. Effective immediately, I said, terminate any future payments associated with my account for her tuition. They said, okay. Asked no questions. An hour later, my dad tried to call. Then my mom. I didn't answer either. That same night, Caroline and I had dinner with her parents. I didn't say much, but I think they could tell something had shifted. Her dad pulled me aside at one point and said, "You know we've got your back, right?" I just nodded. It felt strange being supported by someone else's parents while cutting mine out of my life. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, it was quiet. No smashed glass. No vandalism. Just silence. Too quiet. The silence lasted exactly 3 days. No more slashed tires. No more fake complaints. No more lawyer calls. Just stillness. I kept waiting for the next move, but it didn't come the way I expected. There was no explosion, no ambush, just silence. And that's when I knew something had shifted. I was at my office early Thursday morning reviewing onboarding paperwork for a new client when my phone lit up with 7 missed calls. 4 from my dad, 2 from my mom, 1 from a random number I didn't recognize. I didn't pick up any of them. I figured if it was serious, they'd leave a voicemail. Only one did, my dad. I didn't listen to it. Then about 30 minutes later, the banging started. Not knocking, banging. I looked at the security feed. It was my mom. She was pounding on the glass front door of the office, already crying. I opened the door because I didn't want a scene in front of the staff. She pushed past me like she still had that right. She didn't even start with an apology. She went straight into panic. Tuition office, late notice, payment failure, academic probation. My sister had gotten an email that morning. Unless the bill was covered within 48 hours, she'd be locked out of her courses. The office had already frozen her schedule. She'd missed 2 deadlines for financial aid. She can't lose her place, Mike. That's what my mom said. Like I didn't already know that. Like I hadn't been the one quietly covering her tuition since the day she got accepted. All while they went on cruises, posted pictures of dinners I wasn't invited to, and talked about real family. I didn't say a single word while she cried in front of me. I didn't ask how she could toast the vacation while missing her only son's wedding. I didn't mention the smashed office sign or the truck tires or the fact that they hadn't called once. Not even to lie. I let her speak, and when she was done, I opened the door and stood aside so she could walk out. She paused like she expected me to say something, but I didn't know her closure. By the time I got home that night, I had another voicemail. This time I listened. It was my dad, and for the first time he wasn't angry. He was something else. He said things had gotten out of hand, that this was a family misunderstanding. He used the word overreaction twice. Then, like he couldn't help himself, he added, "You know she's just a kid, right? You're punishing her for something she had no control over, right? Except she raised her glass in that Facebook post. To real family, just us. She was 21, old enough to know what she was doing, old enough to skip my wedding, old enough to enjoy the cruise I helped pay for while pretending I didn't exist." Then came the text. It was short. My sister finally reaching out for the first time in months. "Mom says you're not paying for school anymore. Is this really happening?" That was it. "No, how are you?" "No, sorry." "No, I miss you," or "I wish I'd been there." Just an invoice wrapped in a guilt trip. I typed 2 words and hit send. It is. No answer. The next few days were quiet again, but in a different way. No more destruction. No more phone calls. No more surprise visits. Just nothing. I think they realized I wasn't bluffing. They'd expected a tantrum, something they could wait out, but I wasn't acting out of emotion. I was done. There's a difference. I saw my mom again 4 days later in the grocery store. She was alone, walking slow, like she had nowhere to be. We made eye contact for less than a second. She looked down. She didn't say a word. I walked past her. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. That was the moment it clicked. They hadn't just skipped my wedding. They'd made a choice. And now they were finally starting to live with it. It wasn't guilt that came after the silence. It was desperation. By the end of the second week, I started hearing things. Not from them, from mutual friends, old neighbors, even an ex-coworker of my dad's. Whispers, people asking if everything was okay, if the rumors were true, that my dad had left the company, that my sister was dropping out of school, that something had happened at the wedding. One guy even asked me if I was sick. Apparently, they'd started spreading their version of the story, that I was ungrateful, that I'd shut them out after they missed one minor family event, that I'd gone behind my dad's back and stolen the business. The word stolen came up a lot. What they didn't know, what none of those people knew, was the paperwork, the emails, the months of silence before the wedding, the cruise, the champagne toast without me. No one ever sees the full picture. And I wasn't about to explain myself to every person who heard my mom crying in a grocery store. But something shifted again. They weren't trying to get back in anymore. They were trying to save face. And then the unexpected happened. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks after the last phone call, someone knocked on my front door. Not pounding, just one knock. I checked the camera and felt my chest tighten. It was my sister. She stood there alone, soaked, holding a folded-up umbrella and a backpack. I hadn't seen her in person since the week before the wedding when she swore she couldn't wait to meet Caroline's family and told me she had nothing but time to help us with setup. Then she vanished. I opened the door and she didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, hair dripping, shoulders tense. Then she handed me a sealed envelope. "I'm not staying," she said. "But you should read this." She turned around and walked off before I could even respond. I watched her walk down the driveway and into a car I didn't recognize. Inside the envelope was a printed copy of her withdrawal letter to the university. A single page. She had officially dropped out. No dramatic message. No scribbled note. Just one line at the bottom handwritten. I didn't know what they were planning. I just went along with it. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time staring at that letter. It was the first admission from anyone in that family that maybe, just maybe, they knew what they did. That they hadn't just forgotten. That it wasn't just bad timing. They made a choice. Later that night, Caroline found me outside standing in the yard. She asked if I was okay. I didn't answer directly. I told her about the envelope, about my sister, about the handwritten line. She said only one thing. "You don't have to fix this." That stopped me. Because for the first time in my life, I believed it. I didn't have to play the peacemaker. I didn't have to fund their damage control. I didn't owe them a second chance just because we shared a name. And just like that, something inside me let go. After my sister left that envelope, I didn't hear from her again. No texts, no emails, nothing. I half expected her to reach out again. Maybe ask for help paying off whatever debt she racked up before withdrawing. But the silence held. It was different now, though, less calculated, quieter, like they were finally starting to understand that the money, the access, the support, it was all gone. Caroline's family, on the other hand, stayed steady. Her mom called every few days to check in. Her dad invited me to lunch just to talk about how the business was going. I'd always felt a little out of place with them before the wedding, like I didn't fully belong. But after all this, it was clear they saw me. Not for what I'd lost, but for how I handled it. And then late one night, I got an email from a collections agency. It was addressed to my parents, but had been CC'd to an old business email I'd shut down months ago. One my dad must have used on a loan application. The message was blunt. Final warning. Over $40,000 owed. Something about renovations, personal credit, and a business line that didn't exist anymore. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the attachment. But the next morning, I got a text from my mom. The first in nearly 3 weeks. "Can we talk? It's serious." I didn't answer. That afternoon, my dad showed up, not to my house this time, to one of the client job sites. He stood across the parking lot talking to one of my employees like they were old friends. I watched from the office window. When I stepped outside, he tried to smile like we were picking up from where we left off. "You made your point," he said. "But we've got bills now. I don't think you want your sister drowning in this." There it was again. The manipulation wrapped in concern, coated in guilt. I asked him one question. "Are you still telling people I stole the company?" He looked away, didn't answer. I nodded, walked back inside, and told my project manager to keep an eye on all company equipment just in case. Over the next week, things started falling apart for them. I heard from someone at my sister's old university that she'd been flagged for a housing debt. They were renting out rooms in their house again, something they hadn't done in over 10 years. My mom posted in a neighborhood Facebook group offering home-cooked meals to go for $12 a plate. And then a few days later, I heard the rumor that confirmed everything had hit bottom. My dad had taken a job as a night manager at a local auto parts store. The man who used to brag about our empire, who told everyone we were a legacy business, who skipped my wedding to toast himself on a cruise, now folding cardboard at 1 a.m. behind a counter. They lost everything. Not all at once. Piece by piece, just like they tried to do to me. I didn't laugh. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't help either. When it finally settled, the fallout, the silence, the debt, they stopped trying. No more calls. No more lawyers. No more drive-bys or messages through mutual friends. My parents were too busy trying to stay afloat. My sister vanished from social media completely. One day she was reposting dorm selfies. The next she was gone. I assumed she moved back home, though I didn't care enough to confirm. Caroline never asked for the details. She'd known something was wrong from the day she met them. My parents had barely acknowledged her. At the engagement dinner, they spent more time criticizing the venue than getting to know her family. Her mom still talks about how awkward it was. Caroline kept her distance through it all, not out of pettiness, but self-respect. She gave me space to deal with my family how I needed to. But after that final blow, the debt, the job, the unraveling, something shifted in her, too. She stopped walking around them like they were glass. One night, we were cleaning up after dinner at her parents' place. Her dad was telling a story about building his first house, and her mom was laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. I was just listening, watching, and then Caroline leaned in and said quietly, "This is what family feels like." That moment hit harder than I expected because she was right. Her family had shown up for the wedding, for the chaos after, for me. They hadn't asked for anything in return. They didn't keep a tally. They didn't choose a vacation over my vows. They just showed up. And mine? They lost the business, the money, the future they thought I owed them. They gambled on the assumption that I'd always forgive, always pay, always play the role of the responsible one. And when I didn't, when I finally held up a mirror to who they really were, they had nothing left to stand on. I didn't go back. I didn't reach out. Not when I heard they were renting out their basement. Not when someone told me my dad's car got repossessed. Not when my sister posted a vague quote on Instagram about lessons learned the hard way. And eventually, they stopped being part of my life at all. Not dramatically, just completely. I sold the old office building, rebranded the company, invested in a new property with Caroline's father. He's officially part of the board now. Funny how life works. The man who once looked at me like a question mark is now the closest thing I've had to a father in years. Last week, Caroline and I sat down with her parents for dinner again. Her mom handed me a wrapped box. Inside was a photo of the 4 of us from the wedding, the one where I finally smiled like I meant it. Caroline leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "This is our beginning." And it was. Without them, but not alone. Never alone again. The first update. A month passed. The silence stretched long and hollow like an empty room no one wanted to walk into first. I figured that was it. They had made their bed. I wasn't expecting anyone to change. I had stopped checking my phone for missed calls. Life had moved on. Caroline and I were planning a short trip to the coast. Something simple to clear our heads before launching the company's new direction. And then out of nowhere I got an invitation. Not a message, not a phone call, an actual paper invitation in the mail. It was a dinner invite printed like a wedding rehearsal dinner or some community fundraiser. My full name was on it. Gold trim. No details about the occasion, just the time, a date, and the restaurant they used to take me to as a kid when my report cards were good. I showed it to Caroline. She asked if I wanted to go. I said no. Then I thought about it and said maybe. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I just wanted to hear what they'd say now that everything had come undone. So I went. It was just the three of them, my mom, my dad, and my sister. They were already seated when I arrived. And from the way they all stood up at once, you'd think we were shooting a commercial for Family Forgiveness Night. My mom hugged me like nothing had happened. My dad pulled out a chair. My sister smiled like it wasn't fake. We sat down, and for about 20 minutes it was almost normal. They asked about the business, about Caroline. My dad said he'd heard we were doing really well from someone at the country club. I let him talk. My sister said she was applying to a community college now, starting fresh. I nodded, and then the shift came. My mom brought up how hard this year has been for them. How everything spiraled so fast. How they made some mistakes but didn't deserve to be cut off like criminals. She started talking about how I always had it easier than they did. How I never understood what they gave up to help me get started. I let her finish. Then I looked straight at her and said, "You think this was easy for me?" That shut the table down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene, but I made it clear. You skipped my wedding. You toasted yourselves on a cruise while I said my vows without my family. You didn't call. You didn't send a message. You liked a Facebook photo. And then you tried to take back what you didn't earn. So no, this wasn't easy. Not at all. My dad shook his head slowly like I was being unfair. You don't have to keep punishing us, he said. Punishing. That was the word that finally made it clear. They still thought they were the victims. That they were owed something, that I was the one being cruel for finally standing up for myself. My sister sat back in her chair, arms crossed, eyes glossy like she was hurt by my words. Hurt. They had twisted everything in their heads. I pushed my chair back. No yelling, no storming off. I just stood up and said, "There's nothing left to talk about." And I walked out. No one followed me. Not this time. When I got home, Caroline didn't ask what happened. She saw my face, came over, and wrapped her arms around me. It was done for real this time. No more attempts, no more dinners, no more family who only knows how to show up when the money disappears. Now on to the next story. Story 7. After a family reunion, I gave my mom a used car for her 45th birthday. She came up to the car and said, "Are you kidding me? Take the keys and let your cheap wife drive it." Mom's sisters giggled and Dad stood pale. I just took the keys. This day, my phone was exploding with 44 missed calls begging me to undo what I did. It all happened yesterday. I went to sleep thinking maybe it would blow over in the morning like some bad weather. But I was wrong, so wrong. This morning, I woke up to 44 missed calls, 19 voicemails, and 30+ texts. The first thing I saw when I rolled over was my mom's name filling the screen over and over again. Then my aunt's, then Tyler. I sat there staring for a second before the whole thing hit me again, like a slow-motion crash that finally caught up with me. Yesterday was my mother's 45th birthday, and it just happened to fall during this forced healing family reunion that none of us wanted. But everyone showed up anyway because guilt is stronger than common sense in our family. 2 years ago, she pretty much declared Rachel, my wife, public enemy number 1 after I refused to fund my cousin Tyler's latest fake business. Rachel didn't even speak during the whole conversation, but my mom decided she was the puppet master pulling all the strings. It wasn't just any comment either. It was a full-blown, family-destroying meltdown. She called Rachel cheap, phony, and manipulative. And when my aunts joined in, it was like a pack of hyenas circling fresh meat. Rachel never fought back. Not that day. She just got up and walked out. But yesterday we showed up because, in spite of everything, we're still the kind of people who show up. At least we were. I wanted to do something else. Not dramatic, not flashy. Something real, something that meant something. So I bought her a car. Not just any car, the exact model of the '87 Mercedes she drove when I was a kid. She loved that thing. She used to talk about how it made her feel like someone else, like she was bigger than our little town, like she had secrets. I found one in Oregon. $11,000. Pristine. Sent it out here. Detailed it. Tied a red ribbon on the hood. I didn't make a speech, I didn't rally the crowd. I just handed her the keys while people were still sipping their mimosas on the porch, pretending we were normal. She walked up to it, stared at it like it was a joke, then looked right at me. "Are you kidding me? Take the keys and let your cheap wife drive it." She said it so casually, like it wasn't even offensive, just a fact. Her sisters burst out laughing like it was an inside joke. Tyler recorded the whole thing. My dad, pale, silent, was staring at a bush like he was rethinking life. I didn't say a word, just took the keys, got in the car, and drove away. Rachel didn't say anything either. She just followed me to our car, got in, and we drove away. Fast forward to this morning. The first voicemail I listened to was my mom sobbing, saying she couldn't believe I embarrassed her like that on her birthday. The second was more aggressive. She accused me of ruining everything. The third was from Aunt Marlene, who said I needed to grow up and learn to take a joke. But here's what none of them know. For 3 years now, I've been the one quietly keeping their lives afloat. After my dad's hours were cut and their finances tanked, I started sending money to make ends meet. New appliances? Paid for by me. Their anniversary trip to Florida? My card. Spa packages, grocery bills, Tyler's emergency dental work. Me every month, no questions asked. I never told my mom. My dad knew, barely thanked me, but kept it quiet, too. Keep the peace. Yesterday, after I drove the car home, I logged into the bank and shut everything down. Every transfer, every joint account, even the savings account I'd been quietly building for their property taxes, gone. At noon, my dad texted, "She's freaking out. The bank thinks it's fraud. I didn't tell them it was you." Then came my mom's message to Rachel. "You got what you wanted. Hope the free ride was worth it, you cheap." Rachel read it once, put the phone down, and asked for the spare keys to my mom's house. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just walked away. She came back an hour later. "I slapped your mother," she said. Then she poured herself a cup of coffee and opened her laptop as usual. But that wasn't the end of it. Around 4 p.m., my dad showed up at our door alone. No car. He said Mom locked him out after she found out the money was gone and accused him of hiding it. She accused him of funneling money to some other woman. She's even called her lawyer. Apparently, she's filing to freeze his pension. And then, just when I thought we'd reached the limit of family chaos, my Aunt Lisa showed up crying, makeup smeared, with a suitcase in her trunk. "I left your uncle," she said. "I found out about the money. Your mom lied to us about where it came from. She said it was from her Etsy side business. I quit my job last year thinking I could do the same thing. Now I'm broke." She asked if she could crash with us just for a few nights. Rachel's exact words, "Sleep in the car your sister doesn't want." So now it's late. Everyone's gone. And I'm sitting here in the dark writing this because it's the only thing that feels like it makes sense. And tomorrow could be even worse. At 8 a.m. today, the group chat I forgot I was still in, Fam Bam Forever, exploded like a detonated grenade. I only opened it because the notifications wouldn't stop. At first, it was just my mom spamming voice messages full of sniffles and phrases like public betrayal, childish spite, and emotional abuse. Then Aunt Lisa dropped a message that simply said, "Cooper paid for your life, you ungrateful witch." I stared at it for a good minute. Apparently, when she came to my house last night, she hadn't just left her husband. She'd taken screenshots of their bank transfers and dropped the receipts into the chat. Years of quiet payments from me, discreetly labeled, but obviously not from my father. Furniture, plane tickets, even the down payment on my mom's wellness retreat last summer. Mom ignored it at first. Then she dropped a voice note so long it had to be split into 3 files. Her voice was shaking as if someone had just told her the world was flat. She said she felt violated, like I'd kept her on a leash. Then she said something that made my blood boil. No real son would let his wife hit his own mother. That slap was domestic violence. At that point, Rachel walked into the room with her coffee, read the transcript over my shoulder, and just said, "Is she serious?" Then she pulled out her phone and replied to the group chat with a video. A video I didn't even know she had. It was from the reunion, filmed by Rachel, a quiet clip she took right after the car moment before we left. It showed my mother standing in the driveway with her sisters, laughing, mocking the car, and then saying, "It's always been soft, but now it's broke too. Let the poor thing pretend that this junkyard car is love." After that, nobody said a word in the chat for about an hour. And then, out of nowhere, Tyler texted, "Aunt Marlene says she's taking legal action if you don't give her the money back. She says her pool payment bounced." That's when it clicked. I wasn't just sending money to help my parents. At some point, and I still don't know how, my mother had given her sisters access to the account, or maybe she'd funneled it. Either way, they were all living off it like it was some magical inheritance. So I called the bank again and froze the account completely. Every cent left in there, about $3,000, was put into a holding fund in my name until we could figure out what the hell was going on. But then around noon, my dad texted me something that really turned the day around. "I think your mom is getting lawyers involved. She thinks she can claim the car as community property." The car, the $11,000 Mercedes. She was going to try to take back the gift she publicly humiliated me over after I refused and claim it as community property. Then Rachel laughed for the first time in 2 days. Really laughed. Then she said, "She's going to sue you for a car she said belonged in a junkyard." At 3 p.m., I got a call from a blocked number. I picked it up. It was my mom's lawyer, or so he claimed. He said they were reviewing unauthorized transactions made over the course of 36 months and were considering fraud charges if I didn't return the money. I told him to go ahead and do it. I'd be happy to go to court and show the judge every payment, every receipt, every single dollar that kept her nails done and her vacations booked while she pretended my dad had a second career as a crypto wizard. Then I hung up. At 5:42, Rachel got another message. This time from Tyler. "I didn't know she gave Aunt Marlene your bank info. I'm sorry, man. She told me it was inheritance money." At 6:10, Aunt Marlene sent me a photo of herself crying in her kitchen in front of an empty pool that apparently couldn't be finished without my next payment. She said she didn't know my mother was lying. She said she thought the money was part of a trust I'd set up to help support the family. And I'm sitting here thinking, what kind of trust would keep paying for frozen piña coladas and nose jobs for women who called my wife trash? It's now 10:57 p.m. Rachel is asleep on the couch. I'm sitting here with a glass of whiskey, wondering how this is only day 2 of the fallout. And somehow, I feel like it's just getting started. I didn't even get through my first cup of coffee this morning before things went sideways. It started with a knock on the door. I thought it was Amazon or maybe my dad coming to apologize again in person. But no, it was a police officer. He handed me a white envelope and said I was being served. I half laughed, thinking it was a joke, until I opened it. Inside was a restraining order my mother had filed against Rachel. According to the paperwork, Rachel was now legally prohibited from being within 100 feet of my mother's residence, workplace, or places of peace. What does that even mean? Yoga studios, day spas, the produce section? And the stated reason, physical assault during an emotional crisis. I didn't tell Rachel right away. She was still asleep. I just stood there staring at the paper, trying to figure out if this was some kind of sick game. Then the text started again. "Tyler. Dude, did you really let her hit Aunt Janet? Aunt Marlene. You have no idea what you've done. Your mom can't sleep. She says she's scared for her life. Afraid for her life of Rachel, a woman who once cried because she accidentally killed a spider in the bathtub." Then my father called at noon. He sounded upset, rattled, but also lighter. "I moved out," he said. "I'm in a motel." He told me that after the lawyer's call, things got out of hand. Mom threw his phone at the wall. She told him she was going to find a real man who wouldn't let her son humiliate her. When he told her the money was gone and there was no magical emergency fund, she packed a bag. Not for herself, but for him, and left it on the porch. So he left, took the car, and said he didn't even take a charger, he just left. And then he said something I wasn't expecting. "You know that Etsy store she keeps bragging about? Yeah, she's not selling anything. Never has. Those packages she posts, they're all just empty boxes she sends to herself. I didn't even know what to say. It was just before 2 p.m. Rachel finally woke up, and I told her about the restraining order. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just nodded and was quiet for a while. Then she went upstairs and started to pack. Panicked. I thought she was leaving me. I followed her and asked her what she was doing. She looked at me and said, "I'm going to Arizona. Arizona to see your grandmother." Now, here's the thing. I haven't spoken to my grandmother, my mother's mother, in over a decade. My mother cut her off, claiming she was toxic, manipulative, a narcissist. Rachel had apparently been sneaking messages to her for months. "I just wanted to know if maybe it runs in the family," she said. By 4 p.m., she was on a flight to Phoenix. I stayed behind, pacing my house like a trapped animal. I didn't know whether to be angry, scared, impressed, or just laughing at how far off the rails everything had gone in 48 hours. And then came the email from a local news station. Subject line: follow-up request, family dispute involving local business women. I opened it. Apparently, my mother had given an interview to a lifestyle reporter, someone she knew through a yoga friend, and spun the whole thing into a cautionary tale of domestic abuse, financial manipulation, and family betrayal. She called herself a survivor. She used phrases like financial entrapment and physical intimidation. There was a picture of her in a silk robe holding a cup of tea, looking out the window as if grieving at a funeral. It hadn't been published yet. The reporter said they wanted my side before they went live. My mother made herself the star of a tragedy she wrote and directed. It's now 11:19 p.m. I haven't replied. I haven't eaten. Rachel has just landed in Arizona. She texted me one sentence. She said, "Your mom once tried to fake a seizure at a funeral to get attention. I'm beginning to realize this isn't just about a slap on the wrist or a car or money. This is about someone who has written the story of her life and ours like a script where she's always the victim and we're all just extras." But not anymore. I didn't sleep last night. I sat in the kitchen in the dark, looking at the email from the journalist on my laptop, rereading Rachel's text about my grandmother. It was quiet, way too quiet. My life used to feel manageable, like even when things were hard, at least they made sense. But now I was watching it fall apart in high definition. At 7:03, my phone rang. It was Rachel. She sounded awake, fully alert, which was weird considering she'd just flown across the country. I asked if she was okay, and she said, "Better than okay." She told me everything. She, being my grandmother, the one my mother swore was toxic, unstable, a liar, apparently none of that was true, or at least not the way my mother said it was. Rachel had spent all night with her, drinking coffee and going through old diaries and letters. My mother hadn't cut off her mother because she was toxic. She'd cut her off because she'd been caught forging her signature on documents related to a family trust. A trust that I never knew existed. A trust where I'm listed. That's when everything turned around, because suddenly it wasn't just about drama or ego. It was about money. And my mom had built her entire fake identity around a glamorous, independent success, but she was actually pulling strings from a trust fund that no one was supposed to know she'd been manipulating, including me. By 10 a.m., Rachel had already met with a Phoenix attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse. By noon, my grandmother had signed a sworn statement. My mother had been withdrawing from the trust, not just for herself but for her sisters, and hiding the withdrawals under bogus medical expenses. This was felony-level stuff. And then it got better. Tyler texted me, "Dude, your mom used my name to get a car lease." Turns out my mom co-signed for a luxury SUV 2 years ago using Tyler's name and social security number. He thought she was just helping him with the down payment, but she was actually using him to raise her credit score high enough to qualify. And when he went to trade it in this morning, the dealership told him the loan wasn't even paid off and it was in his name. That same hour, Aunt Lisa, the one who showed up crying with the suitcase, texted Rachel and asked if she could help her get a restraining order against my mom. She said that after she left my uncle, she realized that my mom had been gaslighting her for years, telling her that she couldn't survive on her own, that she'd never be more than a shadow. Stuff like that. The whole damn family unraveled. But not for her this time. And then my father called again. He said he met with a divorce lawyer that morning and was getting ready to file. Not just for divorce, but for retroactive spousal support. Apparently, since he technically earned less than her on paper, thanks to my hidden wire transfers, he's entitled to back pay. He sounded calm, confident, like a man who'd been underwater for 30 years and finally surfaced. The best part? He told her. He told my mom that I was the one who paid her bills. That her mystery income wasn't magic or luck or hard work. It was her son. The one she called soft. The one whose wife she insulted in front of everyone. And according to him, she didn't take it well. She threw a vase, said she felt violated. Said she was going to sue me for emotional sabotage. At 6 p.m., the lifestyle journalist emailed again. I just talked to your Aunt Lisa. We're working on the piece. She gave us a lot of background. Let me know if you want a final quote. So, yes, that soft, quiet little article my mother was trying to float about surviving her villainous daughter-in-law turned into a full-blown exposé with receipts, witnesses, and screenshots. Rachel came back tonight. We ate Thai food in silence. Not because we were angry, but because we were both exhausted from how quickly things were unfolding. At 9:42 p.m., my mom finally texted me directly for the first time since she gave me the car keys. She just said, I hope you're proud of destroying your family. I didn't reply because for the first time in a long time I am proud. Not of the chaos, but of finally putting an end to the story she's been writing for everyone else. And tomorrow it all goes public. Today was the day it all ended. Not with a big courtroom moment or a screaming match in a driveway. It ended the way people like my mom hate the most. Quietly, permanently, and without an audience clapping for them. The article fell at 8:02 a.m. Title: The Woman Who Was Never Broke. Inside the Hidden Web of Family Deception and Financial Control. It was brutal and honest. My grandmother did a full interview. So did Aunt Lisa. Even Tyler went on the record about the car lease, how my mom used his name to secure her loan and nearly ruined his credit without his knowledge. There were screenshots, bank records, even excerpts from emails she sent to her yoga group calling Rachel a manipulative little stray dog my son dragged home. The quote that closed the article was mine. I gave everything I had to help the people who raised me. I thought I was being a good son. Turns out I was just paying rent to a woman who thought motherhood was a performance. I didn't look at social media, but I didn't have to. Within an hour, I had texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. Friends, extended cousins, even my boss. One message simply said, about time. Around noon, my dad texted me from his motel room. She saw the article. She hasn't said a word in hours. And then this. She asked me if it was too late to take it all back. He said he didn't answer. He just went outside and smoked a cigarette he hadn't touched in 10 years. By afternoon, her sisters had gone dark. One deleted her Instagram. The other posted a story that said, some people are just jealous of strong women. No one replied. Around 4:30, I got a call. Unknown number. It was her. She didn't say hello, just started talking. Said I embarrassed her. Said I ruined her life. Said Rachel poisoned me. Said she could have handled it differently. But you forced my hand. I just let her talk. No interruptions, no emotion. And then I said, you made every decision. You wrote the script. I just stopped playing the part. Silence. Then I said, I'm blocking this number. Don't contact me again. And I hung up. I did it. After 33 years, I ended the story. Not with revenge, not with violence, just with the truth. Rachel and I ordered pizza and sat on the floor. We didn't celebrate. We didn't toast. We just existed in the peace that followed someone finally being told no for the first time in their life. And as for my mom, she'll have to live in the silence she created. No audience, no script, no spotlight, just herself. Just the way she made sure it would end. Update. The final curtain posted 3 days later. Hey Reddit. Thought I'd come back with an update since a few of you messaged asking how it all ended after the article dropped. Fasten your seatbelts, because this last part might be the quietest, coldest ending to a storm I've ever seen. First of all, thank you to the people who reached out with genuine empathy. I wasn't expecting anything when I posted. I just needed to get it out of my system. I didn't think my inbox would fill up with strangers saying they'd been through something similar. Wild. So, the aftermath, it's done. Not settled, not smoothed over, done. The article blew through town like a tornado. The local lifestyle blog that ran it was picked up by 2 bigger outlets in the state. They loved the angle of this perfect suburban matriarch secretly living off her adult son while slandering his wife and lying to half the family. They even had a podcast episode taped about it within 48 hours. Mom shut down everything: social networking, phone, email. My dad officially filed for divorce the morning after the article. His lawyer sent over the papers, and apparently, she didn't even contest them. She just signed them and mailed them back. Her yoga studio dropped her. Not because of the drama, they're used to drama, but because the receipts in the article proved she forged a donation in someone else's name to claim a tax write-off. Tyler filed fraud charges on the car lease. His credit took a hit, but he got a real lawyer involved and it's being investigated. My Aunt Lisa moved in with a friend and took a part-time job at some library. She says it's peaceful, like detox for the soul. She's also had no contact with Mom for the first time in her life. Rachel? She's glowing. She hasn't said much, but she's free in a way I haven't seen her in years. She anonymously donated the slap video to the reporter and hasn't looked back. We're planning a trip, just the 2 of us, somewhere boring and quiet and far away from all this. Oh, and my grandma. She added Rachel as her healthcare proxy and changed her will. I'm not even listed in it anymore, and I'm okay with that. Rachel deserves it more. She held this family together more in 2 weeks than I ever could in 3 decades. And my mom? She's still at the house alone. Dad told me she started going back to her maiden name. Like, dropping the family name will erase what happened. I doubt she will leave town. People like her never leave. They just rebuild smaller stages. But no one is watching anymore. The group chat hasn't seen a message since the article. The family dinners are over. The performances are over. She always wanted the spotlight. Now all she has is the echo. That's it. That's the end. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Parents didn't want to see me with my children at Thanksgiving. Your sister's children shouldn't see losers like you, my dad shouted loudly. I said, I stop helping with money, and your sister's kids shouldn't see losers like you. My father's voice echoed through the house, loud enough to make the entire room tense. I stood there for a second, stunned. Did I really just hear that? I wasn't even sure how it had come to this. It was supposed to be a normal Thanksgiving, or as normal as it could be in my family, but this year was different. My sister, Emily, was visiting from Switzerland after 7 years, and you'd think she was royalty from the way my parents acted. Everything had to be perfect for her and her 2 golden children, Lily and Jack. I'd never seen Emily's children in person. Over the years, I'd heard all about them through endless phone calls and updates. They were apparently straight-A students who spoke 3 languages, excelled in music, and somehow had never thrown a temper tantrum in their lives. My parents talked as if they were walking miracles. Meanwhile, my own 2 children, Ben and Sophie, were apparently inferior by comparison. Never mind that Ben had made his school's soccer team last month or that Sophie had won a state spelling bee last year. When I first arrived with my kids, my parents actually let us in for a while. It almost seemed like we were going to have a good time, but the good vibes didn't last. As soon as Emily and her family walked in, the comparisons began. Look at Emily, my mother gushed to no one in particular. She's done so well for herself. Yes, Dad added, his voice full of pride. A nice house in Geneva, a great job, smart kids. All set, not like some people. I didn't need an interpreter to know who he meant. The rest of the evening felt like a long, drawn-out roast disguised as small talk. Every time I tried to bring up something about my own life or my kids, my parents shot me down. Ben made the soccer team, I mentioned in passing. Oh, that's nice, Mom replied, clearly uninterested. Did you know Lily got invited to a soccer camp in Barcelona? They called it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. By the time we sat down to dinner, my blood was boiling, but I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to ruin Thanksgiving for my kids. I thought maybe if I stayed calm, it would all blow over. Then Dad dropped the bomb. "Chris," he said suddenly, his tone harsh and direct, "we've talked and we think it's better if you leave." "What?" I blinked in disbelief. "We just don't want Emily's children around certain influences," he said, waving his hand vaguely in my direction. "You understand. We're trying to keep things positive today." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father was kicking me out of Thanksgiving because my kids and I weren't good enough for his precious little reunion. I looked at my mother, expecting her to intervene, but she just gave me a dismissive look. "Go away," she said. "Don't waste our time." And that was it. Something inside me snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just calmly said, "Fine, but if that's how you feel, don't expect me to help you anymore." "What's that supposed to mean?" Dad asked, frowning. "I've been paying your bills, Dad," I said flatly. "Electricity, internet, that joint account. You think your golden child is going to take care of you? Good luck with that." He scoffed. "We'll be fine without your charity." "All right, we'll see." Without another word, I grabbed my children and walked out of the house. The cold November air hit my face as we walked, but I felt strangely at peace. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I didn't say much on the drive home. Ben and Sophie were unusually quiet in the back seat, probably sensing my mood. They're good kids like that, more observant than people give them credit for. Sophie finally broke the silence. "Are we going back for dessert?" "No, honey," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "We're not going back." She didn't ask any more questions after that. The minute we got home, I went straight to my computer and started unplugging everything. The first thing I did was cancel her automatic bill payments. No more covering her utilities, no more surprise food reimbursements or medical copays. That joint account closed. I transferred out every last dime I'd put in, leaving only the scraps my parents had put in themselves. When I was done, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anger. I'd supported my parents financially for years without so much as a thank you. It was my way of trying to earn their approval even after everything, but tonight was the last straw. A week passed then too. No calls, no texts. I thought maybe they were still riding the high of Emily's visit. They probably convinced themselves they were better off without me. That was fine. I wasn't in any hurry to hear from them anyway. But then something unexpected happened. It was a Monday morning and I had just dropped the kids off at school when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily, of all people. "Can you talk?" it said. Emily and I didn't have a warm relationship. We weren't hostile, but we weren't close either. Still, I was curious, so I called her back. She picked up after the first ring. "Chris, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low as if she didn't want anyone to overhear. "Okay," I replied, bracing myself for whatever drama was about to unfold. "Look, I know things got ugly at Thanksgiving," she began. "I didn't know they were going to kick you out like that. I swear I wasn't part of it." "Right?" I said, not bothering to hide my skepticism. "I'm serious," she insisted. "But that's not why I'm calling. Something's going on with Mom and Dad." My interest was piqued. "What do you mean?" "They've been calling me non-stop asking for money," she said. "I guess they thought I'd step in and pay their bills after you quit." I couldn't help but laugh. "Yeah, that sounds about right. So what's the problem? You're rich, right? Shouldn't be a big deal for you." She hesitated, and I knew something was wrong. "I can't," she finally admitted. "Things aren't as great as they seem." Now that was a shocker. Emily had always painted this picture of a perfect life overseas. Big house, fancy job, perfect marriage. But listening to her now, it sounded like the cracks were starting to show. "What's going on, Emily?" I pressed. There was a long pause. "My husband and I are separating," she confessed. "He's been draining our accounts for months. I didn't realize how bad it was until recently. I'm in debt, Chris. I can't get out of it." This was not what I expected at all. Emily, the golden child, was struggling just as much as I was, maybe worse. "So, what are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know," she said quietly. "But I thought you should know." Mom and Dad, they're not doing well. They won't admit it, but they need help. Yeah, well, they didn't seem too interested in my help when they kicked me out, I pointed out. I get it, she said. They were horrible to you, but they're still our parents. I sighed. Part of me wanted to tell her to get lost, let our parents deal with their own mess for once, but another part of me, maybe the part that still craved their approval, wasn't sure I could walk away completely. Let me think about it, I finally said. Thank you, Chris, she replied quietly. And I'm sorry for everything. We hung up and I sat there for a moment, taking it all in. This wasn't how I expected it to go. Emily's perfect life was falling apart. Our parents were in over their heads, and now I had to make a choice. Would I let them sink or throw them a lifeline? But fate had more surprises in store. A few more weeks passed and my parents still hadn't reached out. I figured pride was keeping them quiet. Meanwhile, Emily had gone radio silent too. I was starting to think maybe things were settling down when, out of nowhere, I got a call from Dad. Chris. I paused for a moment. He never called me unless he needed something. I was tempted to let it go to voicemail but decided I'd hear him out. What's up? I said, keeping my tone neutral. There was a long sigh on the other end. We need to talk. Talk about what? Look, your mother and I might have said some things we didn't mean. It's been a tough few weeks. Okay, there it was, the beginning of an apology. But I wasn't about to make it easy for him. Tough few weeks, huh? How's Emily doing? She covering the bills for you guys like you expected? Dad went quiet for a moment, and I could tell I'd hit a nerve. Emily's having some issues, he admitted. Her husband left her, took a lot of their money. She's not in a position to help right now. And you thought you could just pick up the phone and call me after what you said at Thanksgiving? I asked. You told me to leave because I wasn't good enough to be around Emily's kids. Now you want my help. Chris, we're your parents, he said, like that was supposed to erase everything. Yeah, you made that real clear when you chose Emily's perfect little life over me and my kids. I shot back. So no, I'm not interested. I was about to hang up when Dad blurted out something that stopped me cold. Your sister stole from us, he said. What? Emily? He repeated, his voice shaking with frustration. She drained what was left of our savings and took off. We think she's gone back to Europe. She didn't even tell us. I blinked, trying to process what he just said. Emily had stolen their money? That didn't make sense. She wasn't that kind of person, at least not the version of her I thought I knew. Why would she do that? I asked slowly. She said she needed it to pay off debts, Dad explained. We gave her access to our accounts because we thought she'd help manage things while she was visiting. Next thing we know, she's gone. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. So you're telling me that your golden child, the one you put on a pedestal for years, screwed you over and disappeared? Dad didn't answer right away. I could almost hear the shame in his silence. Chris, we're in trouble, he finally said. The mortgage is overdue. We're behind on utilities. I don't know what to do. I couldn't believe the irony of it all. The same parents who had humiliated me on Thanksgiving were now practically begging for my help because their favorite had stabbed them in the back. You really think I'm going to swoop in and save you after everything you said to me? I asked. I'm not asking you to save us, he said quietly. Just help us figure things out. I sighed and rubbed my temples. Part of me wanted to tell him to deal with it on his own. But then I thought about Ben and Sophie. I didn't want them to see me as someone who held grudges forever. Fine, I said. I'll think about it, but I'm not promising anything. Thank you, son, Dad said, sounding genuinely relieved. We appreciate it. After I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Emily stealing from our parents didn't add up. There had to be more to the story, and if I was going to help, I needed to get to the bottom of it first. Little did I know, this rabbit hole was about to go deeper than I ever expected. After Dad's call, I couldn't stop thinking about Emily stealing from our parents, running off to Europe. It didn't fit the image I had of her. Sure, she'd always been a bit self-centered, but a thief? No way. Something didn't sit right. I decided to find out for myself what the hell was going on. I texted her. Hey, Can we talk? Emily, not right now, traveling. That was it. No explanation, no follow-up. Suspicious. I dug around a bit, scrolling through social media. Her account, which was usually flooded with photos of fancy vacations and her perfect family, hadn't been updated in over a month. The last post was a blurry shot of her kids in a park. Nothing like her usual curated stuff. I made another call, this time to a friend of hers, Carla, who still lived in the States. Carla was chatty and always in the loop. "Oh, Emily? Yeah. Things have been rough for her lately," Carla said after I mentioned I couldn't reach my sister. "Rough how?" I asked. "Well, her husband cheated on her for one, with some coworker, real scandal. And I heard she's been in deep with debt collectors. A few people mentioned she borrowed a ton of money to expand her investments, but it all went south." Investments? That was news to me. Emily never mentioned anything about investments. "Do you know where she is now?" "Not really," she said. "Something about going back to Europe for a while. She's probably trying to lie low until things blow over," Carla said casually, like that wasn't a bombshell. Lie low? This didn't sound like Emily at all. The picture was getting messy by the minute. I thanked Carla and hung up. That evening, I told Ben and Sophie we were going on a short road trip the next day. They were curious but didn't ask too many questions. I packed the car and drove them to a nearby town where my parents had a vacation property. A small lake house they rarely used. I had a feeling that if Emily was still in the country, she might be hiding out there. When we pulled up to the house, it looked quiet, almost abandoned. But there was a car in the driveway. Emily's car. "Stay in the car," I told the kids. I walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Finally, I heard footsteps inside. The door opened a crack, and there she was, Emily, looking exhausted and disheveled. "Chris," she said, eyes wide with surprise. "Mind explaining what's going on?" I asked, crossing my arms. She sighed and stepped back to let me in. The inside of the house was a mess. Clothes and papers scattered everywhere. It looked like she'd been living out of a suitcase. "I didn't steal from them," she said before I could even ask. "Dad says otherwise," I replied. "They gave me access to the account," she insisted. I told them I needed help to pay off some debts and they agreed. But when things got worse, they freaked out and accused me of stealing. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" "Because I knew you'd think the worst too," she said, slumping onto the couch. "Everyone always expects me to have it all together. I didn't want you to see me like this." I sat down across from her, trying to process everything. "So what's the plan?" "Run away to Europe and hope nobody notices." "I'm not running," she said firmly. "I just needed a break to figure things out. I was going to pay Mom and Dad back once I sorted my finances, but now they're making it sound like I robbed them blind." This was a lot to take in. On one hand, I understood why my parents were panicking. They had no clue how to handle their own finances. On the other hand, Emily wasn't the villain they were making her out to be. "You need to talk to them," I said. "And say what? That I screwed up? They'll never let me live it down," she muttered. "Well, welcome to the club," I said with a bitter laugh. "They've been treating me like a failure for years. Maybe now you'll see what it's like on the other side." Emily looked at me and, for the first time in a long while, there was a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "I guess I deserve that," she said quietly. "Maybe," I replied. "But if you want any chance of fixing this, you need to face them. And I'm not cleaning up your mess for you." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll talk to them, but will you come with me? I could use some backup." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to let her deal with the fallout on her own. But another part of me knew this was bigger than just her. If we didn't handle this together, our whole family would stay broken. "Fine," I said. "But you're leading the conversation. I'm not taking the heat for you." "Deal," she said with a weak smile. This wasn't the outcome I expected, but it felt like a step in the right direction. What came next, though, would test all of us in ways I wasn't prepared for. Emily kept her word and met with our parents the next day. I didn't go in with her. I stayed outside in the car with Ben and Sophie. I figured it was her battle to fight. When she finally came back out, she looked relieved but also distant. "How'd it go?" I asked. "They're upset, obviously," she said. "But I told them the truth. I told them I can't bail them out anymore. They didn't take it well." I nodded. "Yeah, that sounds about right. They tried to guilt me," she continued, talking about how they raised us, how much they sacrificed. "But I'm done, Chris. I can't keep pretending I have it all together just to make them happy." For a moment, we sat there in silence. It felt like a shift, like the weight of years of expectations had finally been lifted. "What's next for you?" I asked. "I'm going back to Europe," she said quietly. "I need a fresh start. I'm taking the kids with me. I'll stay in touch with you, though." I mean it. I wanted to believe her, but something in her tone told me this was goodbye, at least for a while. And honestly, I didn't blame her. We both needed space from the mess our parents had created. "I hope it works out," I said. "You too," she replied. "Take care of yourself, and thanks for not giving up on me." With that, she drove off, and I had a feeling I wouldn't hear from her again anytime soon. Over the next few months, things with my parents unraveled even more. They called a few times, leaving desperate voicemails. "Chris, we're behind on the mortgage again. Chris, your mother's medical bills are piling up. Chris, can you at least help with the electric bill?" But I didn't answer. I knew the truth now. They didn't want me, they wanted my money. And after years of bending over backward to please them, I was done. Instead of feeling guilty, I felt free. I focused on my kids, my career, and rebuilding my life on my own terms. We found new traditions for Thanksgiving and holidays, making memories without the constant pressure of family drama. As for my parents, they eventually found a way to manage. Turns out, when people stop having a financial safety net, they figure things out pretty fast. My dad even sold one of his properties to cover the debt. They didn't need me. They never did. They just needed someone to use, and now that I was out of the equation, they were finally forced to take responsibility for themselves. Revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, simple. I stopped giving and they stopped taking. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.